To order at 7:01. Just want to quickly, before we get into any agenda items, is Lisa Hancock on? Are you the Tolland, or the, yep, there you are, Tolland Zoom meetings, great. All right, so if everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, proclamation presentations. We have none, so we'll move on to item 5, public petitions, communications, and public participation on any subject within the jurisdiction of the town council with a 2-minute limit. If you're on a mobile device, you hit *9. Otherwise, you can hit the raise hand function on your phone or on the Zoom app. And again, that is a 2-minute limit. Please note if there's any items of discussion or questions about topics that are on our agenda, we cannot answer them without being at that subject. So, but if you have any comments on those items, please feel free to share them. So with that being said, I see Claudette Morehouse, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Town Council. Claudette Morehouse, 89 Merlot Way in Tolland. I sent in a couple emails with pictures late today, and I hope you all saw them. There were pictures of clumps of salt in the road for the dusting we had last night. Regarding the ARPA funds for the study of the clean drinking water, this is a quality of life issue, a basic human need issue. This absolutely has to pass, as there are people in this town with no potable drinking water through no fault of our own. As we appreciate the bottled water from the town, it is just a Band-Aid and not fixing the issue. So if you want to wash your fruits and vegetables, go grab a jug of water. You want to make coffee, boil pasta or potatoes, go grab a jug of water. You can't turn your faucet on for any consumption or food prep. The state of Connecticut says that these chemicals have the corrosive levels to metal at 250 milligrams per liter. Mine are 3 and 4 times that amount at times. This is what rots out your cars before they wear out. However, try bathing in it. Skin irritations, your hair is brittle. My grandkids just showed up from Florida today, and I'll guarantee you by the weekend, I'll be slathering them with lotion on their red, irritated skin. DEP wants to blame this on the water softeners. They have been around for decades. This just started after the brine use after 2006. This has devalued our homes. We cannot sell, yet we're still paying high taxes that are required by the town. Unlike the crumbling foundations, they get the tax breaks. We do not. This is an emerging issue that will plague this town, just like the foundations. So I'm asking you to vote in favor of this study, to move us closer to the clean drinking water, not only for those already affected, but those that may soon, and it could be even you. Don't throw this opportunity away. And I appreciate the hard work of Tammy at the state level and the town's ongoing conversations on this issue, but it's time to stop talking and do it. You have this opportunity now to bring the basic clean drinking water to your friends and neighbors. Please, I'm begging you. This is our only chance moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudette. Mark Gilchrist.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Mark Gilchrist. I live at 82 Merlot Way, and I'm speaking in favor of the agenda item 8.3 to authorize the $50,000 expenditure from the ARPA funds for an application to the Clean Water Revolving Fund to remedy the problem that Claudette just talked about. I've lived at 82 Merlot for 16 years, and for the last several years have been dealing with contaminated water on a constant basis. And it's from the road salt applications that were made after 2006. The state has been testing our water month after month, and month after month, we get a letter saying that our water is unfit for human consumption. The applications have made the water corrosive, and that then leaches the metals and other materials from the plumbing fixtures into the water, making it unsafe for human consumption. We can't even give it to our dog. water is just such a basic necessity of life. It's really hard to believe that we're going through this in Tolland, Connecticut. And there's really little doubt that the road salt is the culprit here. At a Zoom meeting on December 15th, that was hosted by Jamie Farr, the representative from Ellington, and of course, Tammy Nuccio was there also, and other state and local officials. Ray Fregon, who's the environmental analyst at DEEP, said, and I quote, he said in the form of a question, road salt, is it the predominant source in most of the cases DEP is seeing? Yes, it truly is. And he was speaking specifically about Merlot Way and Zinfandel Circle when he made that comment. So I think the DEP has come around to realize what the cause is here. It just really needs to be a substantial factor. That's the legal standard in this state. And it certainly is that and more. And frankly, common sense would tell you that. If the water was fine before they started the applications and it's eroded continuously since then, I think any reasonable person could conclude that it's from the road salt. I would second Claudette's statement that this is really an opportunity for the town, that there are the resources being made that will allow for this study. It's a start. And I'm asking the town, please do not pass up on this opportunity. Please vote in favor of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Denise Gilchrist.
Hi, I'm Denise Gilchrist. I live at 82 Merlot Way. And just to add a couple things of what my husband just mentioned, this is with regard to the water. President Biden, in his speech about the infrastructure in the beginning of December, he stated everyone deserves, quote, clean water free of chemicals, end quote. That's from the President of the United States, including our little town of Tolland. And so I beg you, please, please help us so we don't have to take other avenues that will be a hardship for all of us. That's all I have to say. It's just very discouraging when you can't even open your tap water to boil water for spaghetti. And it's just terrible in our little town of Tolland. And so please help us. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Heather McCann.
Hi, yes, I apologize about that. First of all, happy holidays. I hope this holiday season is being good to you all, everything happy and healthy and safe. I just had a couple of comments. Does not have to relate to the water. Excuse me just a moment while I find my words here. And I had to pull over, so I apologize. Sorry, just bear with me one second. Okay, here we go. Okay, so Heather McCann, 62 Crossland Drive. I'd like to just briefly speak about a couple of things. First, our town is in a mental health crisis. This has been witnessed not only within our schools, but also within our community at large. I'm grateful for the council and the mental health committee working towards addressing the mental health needs in our community. I know that there's going to be a council meeting coming up in the near future. May I suggest that we do not take this lightly and please do not delay in taking any action. There has been an uptick in public displays of mental health struggles within our community. Our community desperately needs education and coaching on how to identify a mental health crisis within themselves and others. People need access to services and resources on how to get them early and quickly. And we need coaching and education for all of the community so that when friends, families, and neighbors are in a crisis, we can identify and help and diffuse, not ignite. The other thing I'd like to mention is that I've been a part of the Resident Trooper Citizen Police Academy for the past month. It is such a gift to have this available to us. I'd highly recommend anyone applying when another is offered. We have been learning so much from the history of the state police, major crime unit, alcohol and drug enforcement, K-9 unit, the Accountability Act and all of its nuances, good and bad. And Trooper Kevin Eklund is a gem. I have really enjoyed building relationships with him and others. And I have much respect for our law enforcement. And it's been an honor spending 2 hours every week with these fine folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. And then just recognizing, I think, Claudette, is your hand up again, or is that an accidental hand raise?
No, it's up again. Do I get another
no
shot?
worries. Yes, yes, of course.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that the Vineyards apparently has the and the Buff Cap Road area has the highest concentration apparently in the state of Connecticut. But it's not limited to just the vineyards. There's other clusters in town, and it's not limited to just private wells. So I just wanted to, to point that out. Lost my notes. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
All right, no worries. Thank you, Claudette. All right, so just double checking again. If there's no one else with their hand raised, or if they're on a mobile device, you hit *9. All right, seeing none, I would move to item 6.1, public hearings, a consideration of a resolution authorizing an appropriation of $398,155 to the COVID Relief Fund for the Board of Education from the General Fund unassigned fund balance. And Lisa, if you would like to provide the summary, I don't know if Mike Wilkinson is available to share their screen and share that portion of the packet with the public.
I do have apologies to everyone tonight. I'm working off of a Mac. I'm out of state this evening, and Mike's working off on an iPad, and neither one of us can get our screen shared. So I do have the link to the agenda in the chat box. If anybody wants to link to it there, they can certainly pull it up. But there's no way I can get it to work on this computer that I'm trying to work on. So I apologize for that.
I can share it, Steve. I have it.
Yeah, I was about to say I could share my screen as a co-host too, if that works, Lisa.
Are you still co-host? Because I had to make Mike co-host, and
Yep.
now I can't see that you're co-host.
I should be able to. Let me try one moment.
That would be wonderful. Oh, perfect.
All right, let me blow up the screen here, and we'll scroll down to 6.1. So here we go.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of
And I do
course.
apologize for that. Okay, so the Board of Education, as of the end of the fiscal year 2021, did have a balance left over of $796,310. We did discuss this not too long ago during a joint meeting with the Board of Education, and the request from the Board of Ed was to provide 50% of it to the COVID Relief Fund. And also they will be requesting funds for the 1% fund, but that can't occur for that policy until later on in the year for your consideration. The audit is pretty much complete. Matter of fact, I think I just got an email from the auditor regarding the audit report. The number has not changed. So the available funds at the end of the year was the $796,310. So what this does this evening is to bring the request forward to appropriate funds to the COVID Relief Fund, which we're doing through the public hearing. Now, in addition, it was brought up at the last meeting to add some language to change the agreement between the Board of Education and the town council regarding there. Just another caveat to the funds. Any remaining funds at year end, what they're hoping to do, or what was asked, certainly the Board of Education needs to consider it, as well as the council determining if that's fully what they would like to do as well. But the suggested language was basically, if they use these COVID funds, if they were so allocated, if they were to use them up throughout the next fiscal year, then any remaining balance at the end of the next fiscal year would be allocated towards any of those expenditures that were made out of the COVID fund, basically replenishing that fund up to the amount that would be available through savings and charging them off to their general fund using any savings that were in the fund. That is what was requested. I know the superintendent of schools shared it through his dashboard, but I'm not sure of where the Board of Ed stands on this, as well as the rest of the council would also have to determine where they would like to go forward with that, if that's still what your goal is to do. So this evening, regarding the public hearing, there's a couple of options you can take. If you decide that if there's number one, you can continue the public hearing after some discussion tonight. Or if you decide to approve the funds to go into that fund, that can certainly be done. But if there's not an agreement on this agreement between both the town and the board, then that could be done at a later date, or you could just continue it and try to get everything accomplished at one point. It's to your pleasure as the town council, how you want to proceed with this or not proceed. But that's what we have in front of us tonight, is to get the appropriation into place into the COVID relief fund and discuss moving forward with an agreement change, an agreement change. So
Thank
I
you.
see there's a number of hands raised, so.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And I just really want to recognize Dr. Willett is on tonight as well to provide guidance. But with that being said, before we open the public hearing, I'll open up the discussion of counselors. Counselor Murray, followed by Counselor Luba, and then Counselor Udacek.
Thank you. I remembered our meeting 2 weeks ago and the question about this additional caveat to the Board of Ed a little bit differently than you explained it to me, or you just explained it, Lisa. I remembered that one of the council members asked this question, and I thought there was general agreement to ask the question of the Board of Ed, but I didn't think that we had agreed to add it to our agreement or even our draft agreement. So I was a little surprised to see it here as added to our draft agreement.
No, you're exactly correct. And I'm sorry if I wasn't clear in how I presented it. It was to be discussed with the Board of Education once, and then, have an agreement between the two boards or council to try to move forward or not move forward with it. But you're right, it was not to just say this is how it's going to be. It was to definitely have that dialogue going with both the board and the council.
Okay. And so just so I understand what you're saying, at this point, Dr. Willett is here to maybe talk about this, but we don't have any formal communications from the board in response to this question?
I'll defer to Dr. Willett. As far as I know, I do not think there's any formal response as of yet. I don't think they had the opportunity to meet because our meeting was the 14th, and I don't think there was any way to get it on an agenda, and their meeting was canceled, if I remember correctly. And so they haven't had a meeting
Okay.
yet.
Thank you.
Dr.
Yeah, Lisa, just to chime in, the next meeting, it would be January 12th. So if that was the desire, it could be put on the agenda for January 12th for the board to respond to.
Thank you, Dr. Willett. All right. So Counselor Luba, followed by Counselor Udacek, followed by Councilwoman Nuccio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would concur with Counselor Murray's statement, where this wasn't exactly how I understood our discussions, and I think our discussion was more that it wasn't any remaining funds at the end of the year be used for COVID-related expenses, but that is the only that it would, the requirement that we were looking for is that the Board of Education use its operational funds throughout the year to cover these COVID expenses. And then at the end of the year, we would calculate the COVID expenses, and then it would be drawn off of the COVID funds. So basically that this was a fallback where if there was any expenses that they encountered throughout the year, rather than having them offset and take away from the operational fund and them be left out to dry, that they would be able to tap into this fund at the end to reimburse that. But I think that the concern that I had is it appeared that this past year that the COVID fund was used as a primary source of funding rather than a replacement fund. And I think that's when we discussed it last year, when we were first establishing it, that was a true intent of what it was supposed to be, is to replenish the funds, not to be used first and then leave all like a tremendous amount of operational funds in the Board of Education budget at the end of the year. I mean, that was my recollection, and I would welcome any other comments from any other council members if I'm incorrect. But I think that's what we discussed, and that's what the intent was with the COVID fund originally. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Luba. I don't know if Lisa or Dr. Willett would be able to respond at this time. If not,
Regarding what Councilor Luba said, I think I had a different take on it, and maybe I misunderstood. But from what I understood was they had the COVID relief fund to use it for their COVID relief needs that would not have been normally budgeted. They would have their general fund budget throughout the year to use for what they need it for, what they were budgeting for. They weren't supposed to be reserving money set aside for COVID unless they had, budgeted for COVID. And then what was to happen at the end of the fiscal year, had they used that COVID money that went into that fund, and there was any money left over in the general fund at the end of the year, the goal was to take the expenses out of the COVID fund and reclassify them to the general fund where those savings are at year end. But it was not to try to put off something that was budgeted for in the general fund to pay for COVID items throughout the operating year. It was just at year end. And that's how I understood it. So there's a difference of understandings here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Lisa, if I may, I think that was generally how it was understood for us as well. But I think at the end of the day, it's meant to try to protect both the board, the school, and the town. If it's used, within a year, and then there are funds that roll, it seems like the genius of the creation of the CRF, this particular piece of, legislature field was created by the council, was predicated on the assumption that during the pandemic, there may be things that the school, is unsure about or cannot spend on in one year that ultimately would be needed in the next. So for instance, if you do save money on transportation because you can't run buses, and energy because you're not in school, and these various other things that were listed in the one pager, that then in the coming year, because the kids weren't in school, because they had to learn remotely, because of all these things that happened in that, phase of the pandemic, the money could then be applied towards, things in the future, because the pandemic does not care about our budget deadlines. The pandemic runs multi-years, sadly, we know. So I think that was the genius of what was created here by the council, was that it recognized that the pandemic runs years at this point, and that what we may then have or be trying to protect against in one year, that may provide funds or allow for rollover, would then, there would be something in the next pandemic phase that it could be used for to make up for the damage done. So a good example of this is, summer school for July 2020. This would actually fall in next fiscal year. But this was one of the big things that would be the ask for the COVID relief fund, would be that funds put into that would be applied to that summer school, because otherwise those funds have to be put into the budget. And that type of thing, it's a direct pandemic impact. The kids, benefit greatly from having that option. And they did last summer. So that's what the request is this time, would be that it would be used for that. In the past, it, I think, was asked that it would not be used on personnel, but in this case, that's exactly what it's needed for, is those personnel in the summer, the vast majority of that funding. So whatever does roll over, at the end of the day, it can be considered for the ERF, but it still rolls back to the town's general fund. So it's a no loss situation. Ultimately, it covers the pandemic's needs, and then the ERF if can, and then goes back to the town. So it was just, I thought, a great thing that the town had set up to kind of protect and to recognize that the pandemic was a multi-year, multi-phase thing, and that our budgets only stretched 1 year, and that this gave that flexibility to kind of adjust. And of course, we never knew what we were dealing with last year. So, that's why this request this year, it's very specific to that summer school for July 2022, and the associate educators that are needed for all these quarantines and now we're getting hit with even more over the last few hours, frankly. So it's just a lot. And I think the council in their wisdom recognized that, and that was appreciated. And I thought it was a great idea.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Doctor.
If I may, I just have follow-up questions.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Councilor Luba.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess my concern is, I as a member, when we discussed this last year, for the emergency fund, for the contingency fund, that it was specifically directed that it should not be applied towards any ongoing positions for paying for employees, other than I think what we discussed possibly was overtime, if it can be related directly to the COVID issue. But that the concern is that if it's used to create additional positions or fund additional positions, then that becomes a revolving issue, which should be paid out of the Board of Education budget. And again, I think that the main issue here is that we wanted, at least when I brought this issue up at the last meeting, we were discussing it at the last meeting, my concern was that the Board of Education use its operational funds for what it needs, because what we saw this past time is that a lot of it was used for tangential, what I saw is tangential COVID issues, tangential payments that should have come out of the operational budget first and then replenished afterwards. That was what my main concern was. And that's still one of my main concerns about this, is that this is a relief fund, not an operational fund, and that the Board of Education at this point should be able to budget for appropriate activities, given the fact that we are now 2 years into this, that it should be something that they should be able to anticipate, that they should be able to say, okay, these are what we can anticipate as COVID related issues, and then budget for that accordingly. And then that this fund could possibly be used to pay for that, but that, to sort of ad hoc say, okay, well, this is something and this is something, without proper planning, I'm not really in favor of going for a significant amount of funding when the Board of Education now has a significant amount left over of its normal operational budget. So that's my concern.
Yeah. If I may respond, and I appreciate those concerns, Mr. Luba. So these are not reoccurring expenses at all. They're actually specific to that one time, that summer school, and that summer school for all students is specific to the impacts of COVID, which impacted, all the students across the spectrum. We did do it last year. It was successful. It was universally felt to be a very, very positive thing for the almost school-sized number of kids that attended. And so because it was so successful, and knowing that this constant in, out for so many kids of this pandemic, with these rules changing and everything, obvious, always making it hard on families and kids that are in and out of school, both in the past and this year, frankly. This is a very well planned, extremely well put together, extremely well executed last year and would be this year, program that we wouldn't, do into perpetuity. These people being paid are paid for that summer. They're not added positions. The exception is the associate educators, but they know those positions are the year-long or quarantine-based positions. They don't exist in perpetuity either. So none of these things exist in perpetuity. It's just the initial version of, the thinking process in the past was strictly about things. And the food program, for instance, took a lot of hits. The future needs and the pandemic needs constantly shift and change. You know, in this case, now what we're recognizing is that those kids really do need that additional span of time in school for those families who wish to avail themselves of it. So it's very well planned. It's limited in scope. It's not going to be an added thing to the budget in perpetuity. But if we didn't do it here, it would have to be added into the budget, even though it is a direct COVID impact and really a very short term, you know, kind of one time sort of summer thing. Hopefully in the summer of 2023, we won't need it again. But the thing about the pandemic is it just keeps on throwing curveballs. So we're just doing the best we can to respond to it the best way we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, and thank you, Dr. Willett, for that comment. My last comment on this issue, Mr. Chair, is that I think that given the fact that we don't have the Board of Education budget input even on this yet, that they haven't even had a chance to discuss it yet, I think that any vote or any public hearing on this issue should be put off until we at least hear what the Board of Education has and their input on it before we even move forward. That would be my request at this point. But I'll yield the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Luba. Councilor Yudichak, followed by Councilor Minuccio.
Good evening, everybody. First, I want to thank the Board of Ed for always putting in the hard work. Especially, I know the Finance Facilities Committee works tirelessly on going over every little detail. So I know some of them are not here, but Dr. Willett, you could pass that along to them. Mr. Luba, I was going to say exactly what you said, defer the put off the public hearing or extend the public hearing since we didn't really vote on including that letter E and the Board of Ed hasn't had a chance to fully discuss it. As far as, I would not know why you would take away from the general fund that was voted on by the public and use the COVID, replenish the COVID funds at the end. That doesn't even seem ethical to me. Of course, I wasn't on the council when all you guys worked on that, but I would think the general fund, not the general fund, but the Board of Ed budget is for what they anticipated for the year. And as Dr. Willett said, the summer school is part of the COVID. It's not for, hopefully it's not for the rest of our lives with the virus going on. And I think Dr. Willett, you said that even the associate educators, I'm not a permanent thing as well. If you could just clarify for that for me. Thank you.
Yeah, the associate educators, you know, were created basically because of the pandemic, those positions. Now, you know, obviously if retirements come along and there are positions open that individuals are in those jobs, but those jobs as they stand FTE wise, they don't, you know, they're pandemic jobs. That's what they were created for.
I just wanted to add, thank you for that response, Dr. Willett. I just also want to add in there that we, as a council, should not be overseeing the Board of Ed budget. That is not our job. That's their job to decide what they need. And I just really, we are two separate boards. We're voted on that way to do our own independent work, but yet work together. So I just want to really be careful on how we're overseeing and not overstepping what we are tasked to.
Thank you, Councilor Yudichak. Councilor Minuccio, followed by Vice Chair Regan.
Thank you. First, I want to point out that we're not overseeing the Board of Ed budget, but we are overseeing the CRF fund because that is under our purview. It is our ordinance, and whether or not the town council allows it. And the language that it was agreed upon by both parties. So to me, I think there might be some confusion too. I remember it as basically a stopgap for what we've seen, rather than using the COVID fund and having $800,000 left at the end of the year. The Board of Ed could have used the $800,000 to pay the $257,000 COVID expenses, still had $500 and something thousand left to go towards the 1% fund and put money back into the CRF fund if we needed to. So I think that was the intent of the ad. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think that we should not do this public hearing until the Board of Ed has had an opportunity to review it and look at it, and we can clean up the language if need be, or see what the Board of Ed has to say in regard to agreeing to or not agreeing to, or coming back with different language. I think it's kind of premature to have a public hearing on something that the Board of Ed hasn't even met on yet. And last time when we did this, it was back and forth, listening to what we had wanted in the agreement, what the Board of Ed had wanted in the agreement. So it feels a little premature to have a public hearing on it without the Board of Ed having an opportunity to weigh in on the idea. When we talked about it in the joint meeting, there was some back and forth in that. Overall, it seemed like people agreed. So I'd like to see us wait on this until language can be agreed on and the Board of Ed has had time to review.
Can I add
Thank
one
you,
more?
Councilman Mnuchin.
Can I add one more, or do I have to wait till my turn?
If you could, if we could
yeah,
have Councilor
that's fine.
Regan speak first, and
Oh,
then we'll go for
sorry.
the second round of questions. Sorry,
That's okay. I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
no problem. So Vice Chair Regan.
Okay, thank you. I do agree. I think we've gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit here, because right in the agenda item itself, it says it was requested at the BOE to consider adding this language. So I think we need to hear back from them before we move forward with public hearing on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Regan. So Councilor Udacek for a second time.
Just real quick, I mean, it probably doesn't, well, yeah, I guess it kind of has to do with that. Maybe even having a joint meeting and maybe talking about the turf field again. We could do both. I still have questions on that. And I think, if I remember right, the Board of Ed left with a lot of unanswered not saying it right. I don't think they got what they wanted out of that meeting, so I don't know if that's something we could discuss at another time, is maybe set one up to discuss both those issues at one time.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Udacek. So just a quick kind of point of note, Lisa, at this point, would we want to technically open the public hearing and then extend it? Or can we, I know it has to be posted in the paper, or can we simply postpone the public hearing to a future meeting?
I think it would be best if you open it and then continue it to January 25th of 2022. Because that'll give the Board of Education enough time to meet, or if you decide to do a joint meeting, however you care to move forward, we could then continue it to that date and time and just do it that way. So I think it would be best to do it that way.
Thank you, Lisa. So with that being said, counselors, I think the best option here would be for me to entertain a motion to open the public
I'm
hearing.
sorry.
We can get some.
I'm sorry, Steve, I have a point of information.
Yes.
Is there any, if we open a public hearing tonight, does that put any restrictions on our ability to take input from residents or speak about this matter? Lisa, I'm sorry.
Sorry, so Lisa's shaking her head, but
Well, I was waiting for someone to ask me to answer.
go ahead.
It shouldn't, because when you continue a public hearing, it continues the hearing from the public to be able to share their concerns or views at that point in time, because the public hearing is not closed, it is just voted to be continued. So it can be discussed further at that January 25th meeting. That's the one I'm recommending. You can go out later if you want. It's totally up to the council how you'd like to proceed.
But if we have an open public hearing, does that mean we can't speak to, say, anyone from the Board of Ed about this issue outside of our meetings?
I'm not sure. Do you mean at a separate meeting having a discussion about it?
No, I mean like at the grocery store or, anywhere else we might run into some of our friends and neighbors in town.
I don't think there should be any issue. Certainly any concerns that the public have should be brought up at the meeting if there are concerns that you're hearing or that they care to share.
Okay.
As far as I know, I've never heard of any issue of discussing things unless you're trying to say, unless you're trying to do what would be like a public hearing at this, but if you're just chatting with a neighbor or somebody who might ask you a question, I don't foresee an issue with that.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Murray. Councilor Luba, followed by Councilman Nuccio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to follow up on Ms. Murray's inquiry that I just took a quick look at the FOIA restrictions and at the Robert's rules regarding this discussion. And that once we open up the hearing, there's no restrictions on our discussion, that you can discuss it. The only restriction that would apply would be just like any other FOIA restrictions where we couldn't have more than a quorum or have discussions outside of caucus or things like that on the issue. So those normal restrictions would apply, but simply by the mere fact that you're opening up a public hearing and then continuing it does not bar us from having discussions with people that we may have, like any of our constituents or residents. So that I think that just looking at the rules, that does not act as a bar. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that point of information, Councilor Luba.
Thank you.
If there's no other discussion, then I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
So moved.
So moved by Vice Chair Regan, seconded by Councilman Murray. There is, so seeing no other discussion, I'll just do a roll call vote to do that, to open it up. So Councilman Murray,
Councilman Murray's yes.
Councilman Nudicek,
Yes.
Councilor Luba,
Aye.
Vice Chair Regan,
Aye.
Councilman Nuccio,
Yep.
Councilor Khan,
Aye.
and I am an aye, so that is unanimous. So the public hearing is open. If there are any members of the public that would like to speak on this item, they can do so. I believe it is normally a 3-minute limit, but I cannot recall if there actually is a limit. But if you would like to speak, you can identify yourself by raising your hand with the raise hand icon or hit *9. So I'll give that a quick moment just to see if there's anyone that would like to speak on the matter. All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to extend our public hearing to the January 25th regular town council meeting.
So moved.
So
Second.
moved by Councilman Nuccio, seconded by Councilwoman Murray. Is there any further discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Nudicek,
Aye.
Councilor Luba,
Aye.
Councilman Nuccio,
I'm sorry, was that the 22nd?
25th.
25th, yes, aye.
okay, 25th, aye. All right, Vice Chair Regan,
Aye.
Councilwoman Murray,
Aye.
Councilor Khan.
Aye.
And I am an aye, so the public hearing is extended to that second meeting in January. Thank you, everyone. So we'll move on to item 7A, reports of boards and committees responsible to the council. I do not believe I see anyone from tourism or sustainable CT. So in that case, we'll move on to item 7B, reports of town council liaisons. So I'll just go through my slide deck here. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment just to better see people. All right, Councilman Murray, I'll start with you.
There were no blight or historic or Birch Grove meetings since our last meeting.
All right, great, thank you. Councilman Udacek?
Yes, this is actually a report from Vice Chair John Reagan and myself. We both attended the task force meeting on December 20th. I have two versions. I'll give you the short one. So they invited the school resource officer, Mr. Brian Zacklin. I apologize if I said his name wrong. He gave us a lot of information. Information he gave us about what's happened in the town public schools. He did notice more anxiety and that especially teenagers surrounding mental health, the stigma surrounding it. And I know we're going to be meeting with them, I believe, next month, discuss what they've been working on and what they want to present to us. It was very informative, and it was good to have them at that meeting to give us some insight. Also, the Commission of People with Disabilities, we met on December 16th. They would like to also meet with the town council to give a report of what they've been working on. I have contacted our chair, Steve Jones, and Chair John Malteny of that commission to try and work out a date. And we actually also may receive an email from the commission just regarding the accessibility. So it's actually two different things. I know we haven't received one yet. And then the more discussion took place on what the commission's role is, such as advocating for change and focus on accessibility of the green and safety. And then there's no update from the Board of Ed. Like, you know, they canceled their meeting last week because of the holidays. Their next meeting says January 5th, but that is a special meeting to go over roles and responsibilities. And then they'll have their regular meeting. And Councilor Reagan, did I miss anything on the mental health task force at all that you wanted to add?
No, I think you did a pretty good job covering that. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
All right, thank you, Councilman Yudichak. Councilor Luba?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, that I have nothing to report unless I don't know if Vice Chair Reagan was available to participate in the PZC meeting last night. I can't remember what our arrangements were to trade off, but I was unable to sit in on that meeting. So I'll defer to anything that the Vice Chair has to say on any of those issues. But other than that, nothing to report.
Thank you, Councilor Luba. Good timing because Vice Chair Regan's next on my list. So Vice Chair Regan?
Very good. I did attend Planning and Zoning last night, and they continued their conversation on recreational cannabis for potential changes to allow medical and recreational marijuana to be classified as equal, and discussion as to whether or not it can be grown in the agricultural sections of town. They also got into discussion of setback requirements, and that's mostly for decks and sheds. And they talked about height maximums that are allowed for those types of structures. And then they went on to a discussion. There's a resident that would like to have a roadside stand and has filed an application to sell hard cider. And they will get in, and they will be considering that as well. And that was the extent of planning and zoning. And WPCA did not meet this month, so nothing to report there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Regan. Councilman Nuccio.
I had nothing from the last meeting to this one. I'm easy peasy.
All right. Thank you. Councilor Khan?
Nope, I don't have anything.
Do you have any reports?
Nothing to report, but no, sir.
Okay. Thank you. And I also do not have any meetings to report on, so there's very quick updates. Hopefully that keeps Lisa's notes pretty concise. So moving on to item 8, new business. 8.1 is the discussion of a potential creation of an affordable housing trust fund. I'll let Lisa do the summaries, but I do want to recognize Planning and Development Director David Corcoran is also in attendance to provide insight. And I know Bev Bellady, our Director of Human Services, has experience and expertise in fair housing related issues.
Okay, I'm going to shortly turn it over to David Corcoran shortly, but I just, in brief discussion, this item is just to at least open up information to all of you regarding what will be coming in the future regarding a affordable trust fund, affordable housing trust fund. It has to do, it's in relation to new regulations passed by the Planning and Zoning Commission for the, to try to create more affordable housing within Tolland. So I'm going to turn it over to David so he can give you the overview, but this trust fund is not going to be created just yet. It will be forthcoming, but not just yet. We just wanted to at least tell you about it and give you a little information. Go ahead, David.
Thanks, Lisa. Good evening, everybody. So yes, so as Lisa mentioned, what we're here to do today is to let you know about a regulation that the Planning and Zoning Commission recently passed and codified as part of the Tolland zoning regulations, and their efforts to update the regs to support the 2019 POCD. You know, among other things, trying to make things a little bit more business friendly, but also, you know, addressing ways that we can start to diversify our housing options and, you know, begin to inch towards state goals for affordable housing. As I'm sure a lot of you know, there's somewhat of a mandate at the state level that we work towards getting to 10% affordable. Tolland currently sits at about 3.25% as of when we last updated the POCD. And so what we're looking to do is kind of create a little nudge in that direction. So with the help of Dr. Don Tolland, who's with Goldman and York, who led the way in drafting these new regulations and who has a lot of experience working throughout the state, what we came up with is a new regulation that is basically going to require that any developer that comes in with more than 5 units builds at least 5% affordable housing. And then also provides incentives if they want to get to 10 or exceed 10, and that they may be allowed to build at a little bit higher density if they get to those numbers. Now, where the town council comes into play on this is we've also allowed developers, in the event that they don't want to do that and they're not trying to build affordable, with the potential to put money into an affordable housing trust fund. In order to do that, we would need the town council to authorize the creation of that fund. The way we set it up, or at least have framed the regulation, is that the regulation will go into effect on July 1st, 2022, even if the town council does nothing. If the town council does nothing, what would happen is that all developers would just have to do 5% affordable. There would be no way for them to pay money. But if the town council opted to create this trust fund, that would provide developers a way to essentially give us the cost to go out and potentially buy affordable housing from future development to help spur affordable housing. So the number that we arrived at and that we put into the zoning regulations is $50,000. And our consultant, who, as I mentioned, has a lot of experience doing this around the state, felt that that would be a number that would be not scary to developers, but also sort of push us in the right direction. So not something that's going to stop somebody from developing if they want to develop, but also, you know, give us some money to play with to work towards affordable housing. And so if you all are interested in doing something like this, what we would need to do is probably structure some sort of way in which we make expenditures out of this fund and manage it. And I think what we as staff would probably recommend is creating an affordable housing committee of sorts that may structurally function somewhat like the Land Acquisition Advisory Committee, where it's primarily staff. Maybe we get a council member, potentially a PCC commissioner on board, and make recommendations to the town council. You know, some towns take a very active role in purchasing and managing housing. That's a more labor intensive way to do it. What we could potentially do that would be less work, I suppose, is to use the money and sort of hold it in reserve so that if another developer comes in the future, we can potentially pay them to construct affordable and kind of keep the cycle going that way. And that may be less of an administrative burden. We would anticipate that most of the time this fund is going to sit without any money in it. The only way that it would get money in it is if somebody comes in, one, to develop more than 5 units, and two, opts to put money into the fund. If this is something that you all are on board with, we'll get to crafting an ordinance with the town attorney that kind of makes this all work. And you know, we'll see where it goes from there. But I guess the moral of the story is that we have this in place, as noted there on the page. On July 1st, 2022, this will kick into effect. If there is no fund, there will just be a 5% minimum affordable for any development over 5 units. If we establish the fund, then developers would have another option. So with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, David. It looks like there are a couple raised hands. So just as a quick reminder to the council that this is only a discussion item, we're not making any final decisions, but it would be good of us to at least have these initial talks and see if there's any inklings of desire one way or the other regarding these potential trust fund. With that being said, I believe my order was Councilman Nuccio, followed by Vice Chair Regan, Councilwoman Murray, and then Councilor Luba. So Tammy,
Thank you. So I definitely have some questions on this. I had seen that this was modeled after a Fairfield plan, and I was wondering, do we have any information from that plan, how it was modeled, how effective it's been? And I think more importantly, what is their tax base like? How often do they have developments? I would be looking for a town that is similar to Tolland to see how something like this would work. I would venture a guess that we are very different than the town of Fairfield when it comes to development and opportunity there. So that's my first question is, do we have any information that can be shared regarding the Fairfield model? How many other towns are doing it? What kind of information they have and are utilizing, and is there anything that we can share to see if it's successful?
Yes, absolutely. So I may have overstated sort of the Fairfield concept there. So one, obviously, yes, I fully agree. Fairfield is always going to have very different pressures than Tolland is, and different needs. The way Fairfield's structure is broadly set up is that they have a trust fund that is administered by a committee, and it kind of functions the same way as this does. The way Fairfield's model works, they actually require all new development, regardless of whether it's a single family home, regardless of anything, to pay into the fund as a percentage of land value, which is not exactly what we're proposing here. The way we've got ours set up, we're only asking developers who build multifamily to potentially kick into the fund if they don't want to do affordable, as opposed to also requiring anybody building single family to put money into the fund. In further research, Mansfield actually does have a similar program or a very similar language on the books. They haven't created the trust fund yet, but they do have a similar fee in lieu program. What they do is they, in the event that, the way their ordinance is written, in the event that the town doesn't have an affordable housing trust fund, the monies can go to a nonprofit that supports affordable housing as a donation. I don't know that we have anything of that sort that may be a good idea to do here. We could look into that, but that's kind of where it's at. You know, I would say I'd be reluctant to compare how this might work in Fairfield directly to how it might work here, because obviously we're going to have very different needs and different situations here, where frankly, we're not likely to have a lot of developers coming in to build multifamily housing in the first place, right? I know we do have one potentially on the books that may come down the line in the next few months, but otherwise there's not a whole lot on the table right now. So I guess our thought was we borrowed sort of the organizational structure from Fairfield, but the way we're doing it is a little bit different.
Okay, if we could get some more info then regarding maybe the Mansfield or any other town that has it, that would be useful to me. The second question that I have is, any developer creating 5 units, 5% of 5 units is a quarter of a unit. So I don't know how somebody creates a quarter of a unit of affordable housing, and if they would then have to pay $12,500 to go, or whatever, you know, to go towards the $50,000. So In order to do 1 unit, you need a 20-unit development.
Yeah, so the way we would administer this is if a developer came in with a 5-unit complex and didn't do any units, they would either have to do 1 unit or pay 50,000.
So then we're actually asking for 20% participation by that person rather than 5%.
Point of order,
That-
Mr. Chair.
So in that case, I guess that's my concern. If it's,
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, Mike was muted. What's Councilor Murray?
Is the council the appropriate place for the underlying policy? Do we have any say on this policy, or are we just speaking about the fund?
So I would
There are
say
questions
it's
regarding it.
important to kind of be cognizant of the policies planning and zoning has in place. I think if we were to create a fund, at least the way I'm understanding the conversation, we would be able to create the trust fund and have that requirement as a result of it in regards to the 5%. But I am not sure if, David, if you could clarify that, if that 5% is something that's strictly related to PZC, or if that was something the town would be able to adjust off of the trust.
No.
Yes, so the 5% is written within the adopted zoning regulations that are currently in place. So that would be in PZC's ballpark.
Okay, so then we couldn't really make that recommendation, but is it assumed, sorry to interject, Councilor Nucci, just to clarify, so that then in that case, for that 5%, it's either a minimum of 1 unit or 5% depending on the developer's proposal.
Correct.
Okay.
So the town council doesn't have any say as to whether or not this gets applied? Because typically an abatement, stuff like that has to come through the town council. So this is just an exact in reverse. I thought I read something in here that it would come and the actual stuff that you did here. There's something here about it coming before the town council.
Yes, so if the fund is created, the fee in lieu would go into a fund that would be ultimately managed by the town council. So if there is no fund, then there's just the 5% requirement. But as far as whether any individual applicant would have to come before town council to work out the mechanics of it, that would not be the case. So I guess the deposit end would be handled by PCC and the withdrawal end would be handled by town council, if that makes sense.
I think so. I think it does, yes. Okay, so you had mentioned that this would go to help housing, and how does the town council, as you put it, go out and buy affordable housing? And what type of expenditures would be funded from this?
So I think we could structure it however we wanted. I think we could go as far as the enabling statutes for this. I think it's 830G8 potentially.
8-30G.
Yeah. Provides really a broad opportunity to expend the money on really anything housing related. So that could be maintaining existing government-owned housing. That could be buying new housing for government ownership. That could be something else where we're actively managing housing. The other thing to go to is us buying housing, or basically buying a deed restriction. So approaching either a homeowner or a potential developer and saying, hey, we'll give you X number of dollars to put in your deed forever that this is now deed restricted affordable housing. So that kind of gets us out of the business of having to manage housing, but provides the opportunity for to add to the deed restricted affordable housing stock. Potentially the easiest way to manage that is if, let's say your first developer comes in, they don't want to do any affordable housing, but they do want to pay the money. Potentially when the second developer comes in, we say, hey, we'll give you $50,000 or whatever the number is per unit to go above and beyond. and manage it that way, or you could chase down existing housing as well. Or channel it to our nonprofit housing authority. That's also an option. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm definitely against the town owning or purchasing housing. I don't think the town needs to be a landlord. We're not a city, and I can't see us actually owning housing myself. So you mentioned there's one developer currently that's looking at building in town. How will this affect them?
If they get their application in before July 1st, 2022, or the time at which we finalize the trust fund, it would not apply to them. If they come in afterwards, they would be subjected to that, to the requirement.
So if they get their application in before July 1st, 2022, or what was the second part, or before?
When you create the fund would be the other trigger that would cause this to take effect. Yep.
So if we were to create it today, which we're not, and their development is 200 units, they would have to pay $500,000 if they don't want to create any affordable housing.
That would be, yeah, that would be correct. Yep.
And we don't see this as a barrier to people coming to develop in town? That is that, like, I guess I'm asking, is that
Right.
something that's considered like not a big deal, like to throw $500,000?
So I guess our feeling is that on a 200 unit complex, they would have to potentially either make 10 units affordable, where they're still collecting rent, or potentially, yeah, they may have to kick in $500,000 if they were to wait until this takes effect. So, you know, I think with the affordable housing pressures throughout the state, I don't know that it's a massive barrier. $50,000 is, at least certainly our consultant believed, having looked at other communities, that this was a number that developers would be willing to stomach. So I guess that's where I'd leave it. Yeah.
Okay, that's all. I just wanted to know where we were where we thought that 50,000 was falling on the range of things, because I would hate to do something that is going to discourage somebody from coming and giving us more housing options. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Nuccio. I believe if I was correct, it was Vice Chair Regan, followed by Councilor Murray, and then Councilor Luba.
Okay, thank you. I just have one quick question. So the state is mandating builders to when they build 5% of their units to be affordable housing. My question is, how does the town of Tolland not follow that mandate just by setting up this fund and collecting a fee if they don't do that, if the state is mandating it?
So just to clarify, the state is recommending that we move towards 10% affordable housing. The town has self-imposed a 5% requirement, or the Planning and Zoning Commission has self-imposed a 5% requirement. The feeling is that if we collected the fee in lieu of the affordable housing, that would kind of be enough for us to go around and buy an equivalent amount of housing, or deed restrict an equivalent amount of housing to offset whatever unaffordable housing is built if somebody opts not to build affordable.
Okay, so, all right, so I guess the question kind of still stands, so I guess it's not really mandated then, if you can pay a fee and not build the percentage of affordable housing that they're saying we need to build.
Right, so the mandate is on the town, not on the developer, or on any individual developer, right? I'm not even sure if mandate's the right word. The strong recommendation, I suppose, is from the is for the town to get to 10% affordable, as opposed to for any individual development to get to 10% affordable. So if a developer comes in and they don't want to build any affordable, that kind of doesn't help our percentage. But if they pay a fee in lieu of that, we can go around and buy or deed restrict different housing that could, you know, that'll help get our percentage back in line and work towards that 10%.
Okay, very good. That helps me understand that. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Vice Chair Regan. Councilman Murray?
Thank you. I just would like to clarify the role of council, the town council on this item. From what I understand, we could either set up a trust fund, which would allow developers to have a payment in lieu of developing their own affordable housing, or we could not set up a trust fund, and therefore there would be no payment in lieu of option. Is that correct?
That is exactly right, yes.
Okay, so the question before us, or the item before us for our consideration and discussion, is whether we set up the trust fund or not.
Yeah, I would say that's correct. Correct, Lisa?
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean,
Then
right now, we're not really requesting you to do anything. We're just trying to educate you of what has occurred so far and what could be forthcoming for your determination as to how you want to proceed.
Sure, thank you. I agree with Councilwoman Nuccio. I would be very interested in seeing how a similar trust fund works in other municipalities that are more similar to Tolland than Fairfield, and have a better understanding of the expenses outside, as you refer to it, Mr. Corcoran, that would be under the purview of the town council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Murray. Councilor Luba?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just having a hard time, and I understand the discussion and the information that we've had so far, especially with Councilor Murray saying, basically reiterating that this is something that we are bound by what's been passed by the planning and zoning. That this is what the regulations passed. So we really have to decide: are we going to create a fund in accordance that complies with this requirement or not? And in full disclosure, the way that it's written, I am finding a very hard time to agree with it, because what we're looking at is, as Councilor Nuccio said, that 5%. I don't see Tolland getting many large-scale developers. It's taken us how many years to get a developer that's looking at creating more than 100 units, in town. That most of the developments that we're looking at and that we've seen have been the smaller ones of 5 units or 10 units or something along those lines, where now it's a disproportionate effect, where you're not charging a 5%, it's a 20%, as Councilor Nuccio said. So that you need to make 20 units at a minimum in order for 5%. Anything less than that, you're paying more than 5%. You're on the scale of, if it's a 5-unit house, 20%. I can't see us creating additional housing on that basis with those types of restrictions. And if it's going to be, we create a fund in accordance with this regulation or not, I'm a hard no. I'm having a very hard time seeing this. I am fully in support of looking for ways to support affordable housing within the town of Tolland. I think it's something that we all agree upon, but the way that this regulation is written and the way it's going to be effectuated is something that it does not have an equal playing field. It disproportionately affects the smaller developers that are looking at maybe developing less than 20 units, which now they have to choose to either do 1 or 2 units out of their whole thing, out of their development, or pay a higher amount. And so the way that it's written, given that, and given that that is what would dictate how we implement this trust fund, I just can't see it. I think that this is, although you started out saying that we are looking for ways to promote business, this is not a way to promote business. If anything, I think that this, rather than attracting affordable housing, will dissuade it. That's just my opinion on it. I'd be interested to see whatever else other towns have, but the way that this is written, it's dissuading people from coming here to look to develop smaller developments, which is what we need. We need to have not just affordable housing, but any type of rental units so that we can bring people in that may not be ready to buy yet. And we need to have some development done, but this is not the way to do it. That's just my opinion in full disclosure, so everyone knows where I stand. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor Luba. And before I go for a second round with some other counselors, I did have a question for David Corcoran. You had mentioned the potential to, if we had this fund developed and we received, say, that $50,000 or however much from a particular developer, depending on how many units they decided they would be required to make, and they make this payment instead, that we could possibly give it to another developer as sort of an incentive to create affordable units.
That's correct. Yes, that would be a legal expenditure of the fund if we
And
set it up that way. Yep.
Okay, and so would they
Yeah.
be then required to maintain that unit as an affordable unit in perpetuity, or is it kind of a, if they get it, it's like a one-time, it's only for a certain number of years or even one given year, and they could suddenly flip back that unit to being a market rate unit?
I think we could structure that however we wanted. There may be I need to look, but I feel like there might be a specific time period for the state definition of affordable that I think is like 40 years or something like that. But we could potentially, we could certainly set it up to require it in perpetuity if that isn't what the state requires.
Okay, thank you. That that was the main question, because it would seem like a very odd dichotomy to have, if there are examples of other towns where they're buying property and deed restricting it, and then in comparison for developers, we would just be kind of providing them a cash incentive or a financial incentive to make something that wouldn't be in perpetuity, or at least more permanent than that deed restriction. So that was it for me for my main question at this time. So I will go back to Councilman Murray, followed by Councilman Nuccio.
Thank you. I had some follow-up from what Councilor Luba said. He raised points on his concerns about how this might not attract additional housing in town. What, can you just clarify again, what would happen if the council did not create the fund?
If council does not create the fund, a developer would be required to provide a minimum of 5% of all units as deed restricted affordable housing, which I think we would interpret to mean that if it's less than, if they have less than 20, they would need to do one. Yep.
Okay, so Councilor Luba expressed some concerns about the policy, but that policy is not in front of us at this time.
That's correct.
And the policy is written by whom?
It was written by Don Tolland with Goman and York, who was advising the Planning and Zoning Commission. Yep.
So this is a planning and zoning policy?
Correct, yes, this is in our zoning regulations right now.
Okay, and it's already in effect, or it has a future effective date?
Yes, it is currently in effect with an effective date. If that makes sense.
What is the effective date?
So it was adopted on October 26th, but the language that was adopted on October 26th and effective October 26th kicks this into place on July 1st, 2022, or whenever you guys create a fund, whichever comes first.
I see. So if we were to create a fund before July 1st, 2022, then this policy goes into effect. But if we don't create a fund by then, the policy automatically goes into effect on July 1st, 2022?
Correct, but without a fund.
Without a trust fund.
Okay, and I thought I heard you say that that the council would be responsible for how monies are spent out of this fund?
That is correct? Yes, yeah, that would, once the money's in town coffers, that becomes your purview. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess then my request to you, Lisa, is as we continue these discussions, it would be wonderful to understand how the council could use this money, because Mr. Cochran had several ideas or examples of how other towns use it, which I definitely heard some of my colleagues have concerns with. And it would be wonderful to get a sense of what our options are.
Sure, and certainly with the development of the trust fund, there's a lot that goes into it. You would have to create the ordinance, town attorney would have to be involved and all that going forward. And certainly there'd have to be a tremendous amount of discussion as to what way, and we will get that other information for you, but as to what way you'd like to see those funds be used to contribute towards affordable housing. So what we will be, David, I'm asking you, since I'm not in the office tomorrow, if you could try to get some research as to how other ordinances look and how they're being used in other towns, whether they have a housing authority in other towns and the funds are going to them to implement, or just as you said, going to other developers, which kind of stinks in my opinion, because, well, great for some other developer, but I probably shouldn't have said that. I apologize. It would be great for a new developer coming in to comply, but the other one decided not to. So there's a lot of things, but if you could try to get some research on that we can share when we're ready to start developing this ordinance, we can come forward with some ideas for the town council to consider.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Murray. Councilman Nuccio, followed by Councilor Luba. Actually, Councilor Luba, I think, lowered their hands, so.
Thank you. So David, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe deed restriction is 50 years from 8-30G. So one of the items you said that we could possibly do is to pay a homeowner to deed restrict their house for X amount of years or whatever. Perpetuity scares me because, that's anything in perpetuity scares me. But is that one of the uses that you would see this as, is to go to somebody who has multi-unit and say, if you deed restrict one of your houses, we'll give you $50,000?
I think that would be probably our recommended approach for using that fund in terms of ease of administration and actually getting stuff deed restricted. Yes. Yep.
So, okay, then my next question is, I believe prior to this regulation that you guys passed, we had a 10% requirement, but that was more than not often waived, correct?
So we had one. I don't know if we had one in a couple of zones, and I don't know that we ever had a viable development application that would have met that threshold. I don't know that we ever waived it, but I could be wrong on that.
I believe it was waived for the College View apartments, because I know I had asked about that one, and they were also looking at waiving it for the last developer for TVA when they came in, because he said there was no way he could afford to do 10% affordable housing units in that development, but that development didn't go through. So I guess my question is, with this thing that you have here, if we were to not approve the fund and it just then defaulted down to a developer had to provide 5% of their units as affordable, would the PZC still have the ability to waive that requirement on a case-by-case basis?
It does not appear that the commission granted themselves the right to waive the requirement on a case-by-case basis. They did reserve the right to not accept a fee and to just require that the affordable housing is built, but they did not reserve the right to waive it.
Okay, so let me make sure I got that right. They allowed themselves to waive the fee. So if we put the fee, the fund in place, the PZC can say, we're not going to charge you for it?
Well, they reserve the right not to accept a fee and require that 5% are constructed. So they didn't give themselves a total out. They just said we can say you can't pay a fee and you have to build affordable. Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I have that right. With the fund, they can, if we say yes, we're going to put this fund in place, because I want to be perfectly clear. I'm not opposed to the fund. Right now I'm opposed to not having enough information to be able to decide on something like this, right? So that's my concern here. If we were to say, yes, we want to do this fund. The PZC, if a developer comes before them, say they want to put it, say the TVA gets developed and they want to put in 200 units. And the PZC, and the developer says, no, I don't want to put any affordable housing in. I'll pay the $500,000. I got the money, not a problem. I'll pay it. The PZC can say, no, we don't want your money. You have to put in the affordable housing or you can't build.
That's correct, yes.
So how does that work? Like, I guess that's where I'm confused. So town council has control over the fund and how it gets spent, but doesn't have any say in how, or like if it's applied or not. It's like almost like a reverse abatement to me. So I guess I'm confused on that. Do you know if there will hopefully be forthcoming information that will clarify that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the simplest way to think of it is, yeah, the PZC controls the inbound money and you control the outbound money. And so they decide what gets put into the fund and you decide how to spend it once it's there. But and that's how Fairfield works. That's how if Mansfield establishes their fund, that's how theirs would work as well. Yep.
Okay, I think that's all that I have for now. I reserve the right to take that back, but I think I'm good.
Of course. Thank you, Councilor Minuccio. Councilor Luba, and then I have a follow-up question to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so again, just for clarification, because I think it's important that, you know, for all of us, but mainly for me, because I'm just very, you know, very undecided, let's put it that way, against this, where if we do not pass, if we do not approve the request for the housing fund, then the way that this regulation is written, the only option is 5% affordable housing. That's it. That's the only way that you can build here in Tolland. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, but then the question comes, going back to the whole issue of, you know, okay, you have a 5-unit house, 5%. I mean, 1 unit isn't 5%. As Councilor Nuccio pointed out before, that's a quarter of a unit. So you're basically forcing them to do 20% of their overall units. Is that about accurate?
That is my interpretation of what we have written. Yes. Yep.
Okay, but then there's a, can you see the issue regarding it, and that how there's a built-in legal challenge on it right now? I mean, this is something where the regulation as written is already facially invalid, because 5%, but if you, and setting the, if you would move the housing up saying 5% of 20 of anybody building 20 or more, then there's a legal, then there's the legal, there's no legal issue. But by writing this, you already have written and constructed in basically a facially invalid regulation, because now you're requiring somebody that's building a 5-unit development to allocate 20% instead of 5%. Do you see what I'm saying? Where you're now asking us to vote on an issue that is facially invalid and legally infirm.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilor Murray. So I think I'm, if you don't mind me interrupting, I think I know what you're asking about. I think we should be very focused as councilors on the idea of the trust fund and not so much.
I know. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think there's a point of note and potential concern, but I think planning and zoning has to utilize their own legal team and group to kind of go over the policy. But, and I hope you don't mind me interjecting for a moment, Councilor Luba. From what I believe Councilor Nuccio had said, that there is an opportunity for the Planning and Zoning Commission to waive it. And so there's a chance that they might waive that fund.
No, I think that based upon what was said, they don't have that ability to waive it.
No, they don't.
They can actually, the only thing they can do is either say, yes, we will accept it, or no, we will not accept it, and you still have to build that 5%. Those are the only two options that they have, that there's no ability to waive it as it's written. So, and I understand the point of order here, but the point of issue is that we are being asked to vote on to consider an affordable housing fund on a regulation that could be legally invalid on its own face. And so we need to be cognizant as far as whether or not this regulation is valid the way that it's written. Because otherwise, then if we vote on it and we approve a fund that it gets challenged at a later point in time, that could nullify this whole issue. And I think that's what I really would like, to have our own town attorney take a look at this. And say, I mean, I understand that this is something that's before planning and zoning, but I'd like a legal opinion on this, because I don't think that we can vote on an issue when you have a regulation that is legally invalid on its face. Even though we're only being asked to look at the funding issue and setting up a housing fund, that if this regulation is invalid, that makes the housing fund invalid as well. That's my point of issue here.
Thank you, Councilor. But I just want to recognize Lisa had their hand up. They may be able to clarify.
Not to clarify, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to be offline with David at a, managerial meeting to discuss this, and then possibly I can meet with the P&Z to get some input from them and see what can be done here to make sure that this is a legal regulation.
I mean, and I appreciate that. It's just that
these
I
are-
don't want us moving forward on addressing an issue that we can't, that would be legally void,
Mhm.
because we'd be spending all this time on addressing an issue that all you need is one developer to come in saying, I'm developing 5 houses. This is not 5%. This is 20%. And as such, this does not apply to me. I mean, that's a built-in lawsuit right there.
We will get this, we'll look into this and try to get this resolved, and certainly share whatever information we have. But I do understand, we can't move
Talking
forward.
about using the green for the
Hello?
Ag Commission.
Right.
Uh,
So I would, thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Hancock, that I would respectfully request a legal review by our town attorney on this issue. Because again, this is something that we need to know and we need to have resolved before we can go forward and actually take a vote on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Luba. And then I had a quick question for David. I know this probably isn't something you have all the details for, because we're comparing, if we were to create this trust fund, it would fall similar to the land acquisition process. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we can, it would be totally your call as the council as to how to structure it. I think from an administration standpoint, that might be the easiest way to do it, is to do something similar to land acquisition advisory, that is a recommending body to town council that allows us to hunt things down. Yep.
Okay, and then this might be a question for Lisa. If we were theoretically to receive a sizable amount of funds from any developer, is there a threshold that we would have to meet that would require a public hearing, or would it be a straight appropriation style vote in terms of, obviously we had a public hearing on appropriating the 398,000 for the CRF fund. If we had 500,000 and there was a large developer that was willing to do this, if they received that grant, would we have to have a public hearing to go through that process, or would it be a more of a straight new agenda item vote?
I would need to get our legal input on that.
Okay.
It all depends on how our ordinance is written and what allowances are written into that ordinance. But you may want to have a public hearing, things like that built into it. But let's just get the regulation
squared away
first. Then we could start working on if we get that clarified, or if they have to make adjustments to their regulation for some of the language. We'll get that done first, and then come back to you with looking at trying to create an ordinance, and we'll get all the information as to how you proceed with appropriations and uses and all that. That would certainly be under the council's purview as to how you want to do it.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think just one more question or potential request. In reviewing how other towns perhaps administer their trust funds, for those towns that do perhaps engage in creating agreements with homeowners or property owners to create deed restrictions on making their homes affordable. I would be curious how those towns perhaps advertise or make the public aware of that option. Just as there are homeowners that come to the land acquisition to donate their land potentially or sell it, if that's the case, to become open space or conserved for whatever purpose. I would assume that there's probably some information that advertises that opportunity to the public. I'd be curious if for affordable housing, if any towns do something like that.
Okay.
And that was it for me. So we will go back to Councilman Nuccio.
Hi there. What you have on the screen right now, David, I was hoping you could kind of explain this part to me. I had this on my list of notes, but my iPad died. So I'm typing on an email to send to myself for later. Anyway, no, don't move. Go back to where you were. The 10%, the 10% here, right? So if somebody comes in and it says if a minimum 10% affordable housing units are to be constructed, the applicant may request to purchase a density bonus up to 10% of the total proposed units by paying fee in lieu of $50,000 per unit for each market rate unit. So if somebody comes in, right, say it's the same 200 units and they want to do 20 units that are affordable, that's 10 more than they are required to do, right? I guess I don't understand this 50,000. What is this for? Does this then go into that fund also, or are we paying them $50,000 to do more than the 5%?
So they would be paying us. So the way this works is if somebody wants to, if we have just to keep it simple, if we have a 200 unit property and the way the site is configured, our density requirements would allow for exactly 200 units. If they were to opt to build 220 units, so including 10% of affordable housing, they would have the ability to then buy. So 20 of the 200 are affordable. They would have the ability to then buy another 20 unaffordable units on top of that by paying $50,000 for each unit. So they could potentially build 220 units where we would normally allow 200, of which 20 would be affordable. And so basically, if they want to go above and beyond density and aren't doing affordable, they would have to pay $50,000 per unit. Is the way this is written.
So if they wanted to build, if their plan was 200 and then they wanted to build 220, that's 10%. They can buy another 20 to get to 240 by paying.
Or they would pay the money to get from 200 to
220.
220. Yep. But in that case, of the 220, 200 would be okay. Well, okay, yeah, you're right. Maybe that was a bad example. Let me think about the math here. So
when you start talking math, I pay a lot more attention. So
okay. So if somebody has 200 units, they would be building. They would be, in order to be eligible for the density bonus, they would have to build 20 of the 200 as affordable, which would give them 200 total units, of which 20 are affordable. They could then buy another 20 units that are unaffordable for $50,000 per unit. So that would give them 220 units, of which 20 are affordable, which is less than 10% of 20 over 220 is less than 10%. If you do the division.
So why are we the 10% here, not the 5? Is this
so that's to provide the opportunity for a density bonus. They can build up to 10% voluntarily and not have to pay any additional money. So if they build 200 units and they make 20 affordable, they would not be on the for any funds. But if they built 220 units and only 20 were affordable, then they would be on the hook. But they would be then allowed to have 220 units where they would normally only be allowed to have 200 from a lot configuration standpoint.
So at that point, the 50,000 they'd be paying $1 million to do 20 more units.
They'd be paying
50,000 times 20 is $1 million.
if that's what they wanted to do, yes, that would be what they would be required to do.
And
But
that and that $1 million would then go into this fund.
correct.
But if we don't have the fund,
If we don't have the fund, then they don't have to pay anything. It would just, they would have to build only 5%, not.
Well, they can still build 10% affordable without having to pay any money. Or
Right.
they could take advantage of a density bonus without, but anything in the density bonus would have to be affordable. So they could build 200 of which 20 are affordable, and then build an extra 20 affordable units for 40 total affordable units of 220. But if they wanted to have 220 units and only 20 were affordable, they would have to pay money. If they're assuming that they're on a lot that only supports 200 units based on our setbacks and things like that.
But they wouldn't have to build 10. They only have to build 5, correct?
That's correct.
If they want to stay within the 200, they would only have to build 5%, not the 10.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. All right.
it was a bonus for a developer who wanted to be able to go beyond the density. I'm sorry, Chairman Jones, may I? butt
Yes,
in?
of course.
Sorry. It was a way to allow the developer to maybe have additional units that would be at a full value for them to get full rent capacity, but still give the extra 10%. So it lets them go beyond the level density of, let's say, if it were 200 units and 20 of them had to be affordable, it lets them pay to say, okay, I have the 200 units, but I really need 200 units to make this work at not affordable housing. So it allows them, if they do that 10%, it gives them the opportunity to say, all right, I'll give you $1 million. Now I can bring it up to 220 units and be able to do the 20 units as affordable and still have my 200 that I need to make this project work, or to whatever they want to do it for. David,
I
am I
guess-
right?
I get that. I guess my question is then, do we have zones where you have the minimum 10%? Because I thought this was making it 5%.
It's not a minimum of 10%, it's a bonus that allows them to go beyond the 5%. If a developer so chooses to go beyond 5%, then he has the option, if he goes up to 10%, he has the option to build more units than he was originally legally allowed to do. But
Okay.
the minimum is 5%.
So the 5% is really what they have to do. The 10% kicks them into an optional, and they can pay $1 million
Yeah.
to build 5% more and get 20 other units.
And
Or
if you
actually, at
don't-
that point, would they get 20 other units or 10 other units? I can't, the math is screwing with my head.
I'm just throwing numbers out there.
Yeah, they would get 20 in that case. But yeah, you've got it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Nuccio. I don't see anyone else's hands up, but I think we received a lot of good input and questions that can be circled back at a future meeting once we have all this information summarized and outlined for the council. So if there's no objection, if there's no other comments from councilors, we'll move on to item 8.3, or 8.2, my apologies, 8.2. And that is a consideration of a resolution to amend Chapter A 176-6 of the Town Code, Policy Number 6, policy regarding use of the Tolland Green by groups and organizations. Just as a quick point of note, there's a lot of information that was provided. I believe in speaking with the interim town manager, this will just be kind of a discussion point. And so for that point of discussion, we will most likely want to postpone this topic just so that the various documents that were shared can be summarized and ultimately and ultimately voted on at a later date. So with that being said, oh, sorry, Councilor Lube, I see your hand is up. Is that in regards to this item?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to concur with the chair where this is something that was discussed before, which I think that there's a lot of information out there for the new counselors to go through to see what the discussions were, some of the issues. And I think that, this is something that really should be put off till a future date to be discussed, because this is something that there was a lot of discussion on it. There's a lot of information, and to try and summarize it within a short period of time, even for just for discussion purposes, I think it's something that should really be a lead issue on a future date. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Luba. So Lisa, if you'd like, yeah, Lisa, your hand is raised. If you want to give a quick summary and then.
Well, basically, I did want to, first of all, apologize to all of you. Without my email that was going to explain all this did not get out till very late last night. I do apologize for that. It's just been crazy with what I'm dealing with. And I'll tell you a little more in my manager's report when we get there. So that was the idea. I was going to recommend that we do postpone this item because a lot of information came to my attention where when I was thinking about the green, I thought it was just the sign language that was updated and did not recall the discussions until we started searching minutes and everything else. So what I wanted to do was to make sure that all council members had it, but then to also suggest that when we get time to go through it and all, and then put it on a future agenda that gives everyone the opportunity to get some background on this particular situation. And I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Lisa. And then I see Councilor Nucci, or Councilman Nucci, your hand is up.
Thank you. I would just highly recommend everybody, especially read the last two councils 2 minutes, because we spent a lot of time working on this policy and what we were trying to do with it. But yeah, it was the July 28th and the September 22nd. There was a lot of back and forth on trying to make the green more accessible for use for people. So I think we did a lot of work on this already. And I kept going back to my notes because I didn't remember this falling off the radar. And the last thing that I saw in that, so I totally apologize for it falling off the radar, but I would encourage everybody to go back and read those minutes, especially because we did already kind of have a lot of conversations, and I'm interested to see what the new counselors would think.
Thank you, Councilman Nucci. I concur with those remarks. So with that being said, if there's no other discussion from counselors, I would entertain a motion to postpone item 8.2 to a future meeting.
So moved.
So moved.
So moved by, I think, Councilor Luba, seconded by Councilman Murray. And I'll go by a roll call vote for all those in favor. Councilman Nucci.
Yes.
Councilman Murray.
Yes. Yes.
Did I lose my connection? Okay, sorry. I lost my connection for a second
Did
there.
you include a date?
Councilwoman Yurchik. Sorry, what's that?
Did you include a date as to when you postponed it to?
No, I just said a generic to a future date. There was no, I think it'd be good just to make it to a future meeting. It doesn't have to be immediate.
To be determined? Okay.
Yeah. All right. So Councilwoman Yurchik.
Yes.
Councilor Luba.
Aye.
Vice Chair Regan.
Aye, and just for the record, I was the one who made the motion, not Councilor Luba.
Okay. Lisa Pascuzzi, if you can clarify that, just that Vice Chair Regan made the motion. It was seconded by Councilman Murray. And then Councilor Khan.
Aye.
And I am an aye, so that is unanimous. So this is postponed to an indeterminate date. Thank you, everyone. So moving on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So we are moving on to item 8.3, which is the consideration of a resolution authorizing $50,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act, known as ARPA, to fund a study for well water concerns for potential application to the Clean Water Revolving Fund. So just as a point of note, due to a personal conflict and the advice of the town attorney, I do have to recuse myself from this discussion and vote So Vice Chair Regan will be manning the meeting. I will be present, but with my mic muted and camera off, so as not to seem as though I'm engaging in any discussion. And I would encourage counselors not to reach out to me via text until this item of discussion is concluded. So with that being said, I will turn the meeting over to Councilor Regan and recuse myself at 8:51.
Okay, very good. I'll be pinch hitting on this one. So we just heard Mr. Jones read the motion. So Lisa, if you could help us understand this.
Yep, and I am trying to get to that page. I'm going through the hundreds of documents.
124, it's 124.
Okay. Bear with me. I'm on page 105. And while I'm still searching, in the meantime, tonight I also have here Craig Patla from Connecticut Water, and Bev Bellady, who is our liaison to the Water Commission. I think I also saw Jean Koss on there. And they will also be here to provide additional input. And here I am, finally. Okay. On December 9th, the Arpa Subcommittee, which consists of Colleen, Tammy, and myself, met to discuss potential use of the ARPA funds. This is to address well water concerns in the town of Tolland. Currently, there is, where do I begin? There's certain areas of town that do have issues with their well water. This particular study was to focus on, and I can be corrected if you'd like, Tammy, on the vineyard area and surrounding areas up in that particular section of town. What we were looking to do was to have a study completed and a cost analysis by Connecticut Water Company to see what it would cost to bring potable water into these areas. There are potential funds with, I think we call it Clean Water Revolving Fund. I think it's Clean Water Resolving Fund, that there will be some loan applications opening up sometime in January, and I think they have to be completed by late February, early March at the latest. Well, we don't have the deadlines as of yet. What this program is to allow for would allow the town to apply for a loan, which could potentially become funded by some partial state funding as a loan forgiveness program. It's not a grant, but it's a loan forgiveness program. We have no idea at this time if it would be 100% loan forgiveness, 20%, 50%. I think that's all going to depend on the number of points that you get in the application process. And there's several different factors that are included in that process that you get more points for, and the more points leads to the more ability to be able to get those funds. Part of the requirement is to have a study cost analysis done to submit along with the loan application. So what we'd like to do, and it is a permissible use of ARPA funds under the federal treasury rules, is to use $50,000 up to $50,000, okay, up to $50,000 to provide for this study, so we could do the application if, depending on the costs and everything else involved, to move forward to try to get the potable water. Certainly, it's the council's decision to move forward with that, if that's something you all decide to do after the study is done and the needs are determined of the area. In addition, from my understanding, and I still need to go through the contract language with Mr. Patla, there was going to be a survey or assessment study questionnaire prepared that the town would have to distribute to see if there's any other potential areas of town that are affected besides the one in the vineyard and surrounding area. I think it's Ivy Woods area. And I know there are a couple other areas up that way. So that was the goal, is to try to see if there were any other areas as well. But right now, I think the loan application was going to focus in that section of town. Councilor Nuccio was involved as state representative as far as working with the Department of Health and trying to get funding for this. It was separate from her position as counsel. So there's a little bit, she has a little bit more information about the entire process. But if you'd like to add anything to it, Tammy, I'd appreciate it. Or if I missed anything.
Thank you, Lisa. So one of the key things with this is there are several areas besides the vineyard location that have this issue, especially surrounding the vineyard area. There are at least 19 homes in the immediate vicinity there. There's also issues at Ivy Woods apartment complex. There are issues at the state police barracks complex, and there are issues in other places in town. And the key thing with this is currently the state of Connecticut is slated to receive $440 million that are specifically to go towards clean water. And 40% of that is to be used for disadvantaged areas and justice related issues. 60% of it is being split between any of the project related stuff that is coming through the towns. In the meeting with DPH, they definitely said, they said that Tolland has the highest concentration of contaminated wells in the state of Connecticut. So that's a very big thing to understand with this. This isn't just a couple of houses here and there. We have the largest contaminated clusters of wells in the state of Connecticut. There are, as Lisa said, several different ways to get points. 3 of the 4 different things you have to qualify for additional points. We do qualify for. So we have the ability here to either receive a subsidized loan of either a significant, it could be 5%, it could be 100%. We won't know that until we actually put the application in. And we can't put the application in without doing this study. So this is a Tolland water. One of the things that you guys should all try to understand is we have 2 separate water distributors in town. We have Tolland water, and then we have the Connecticut Water Company that have different areas of town that have some issues. This one would be focused through the Tolland Water Commission. Eugene, as Lisa mentioned, is on here, and the Tolland Water Commission is on board with this survey along with Bellady. And when we met in the Arpa Subcommittee, we voted to bring it forward to you guys. This is the up to $50,000 to do the study, which will provide us the engineering information that we need, and then help create the needs assessment that the town will have to find, that we'll have to distribute to see if there are even more people in the area that are having these issues. We know, as Lisa mentioned, there are other areas in town, and I'm hoping that there's an opportunity to move forward with some of those also, but the largest area right now, in the most encompassing area to be able to help the largest amount of people, is definitely in the Vineyard area and down 74, catching Ivy Woods and the police barracks and anybody else who's having issues along that route. This does not commit us to taking a loan. This does not commit the town to bring in public water. This does not admit guilt in any way. It does not do anything like that. It just gives us the opportunity to apply for once in a lifetime grant money that's coming from the federal government. It's just the first step in the application process. So I'd like to see it go forward because I think there's money there that can help us bring this infrastructure to town and meet the needs of at least 19 different households that we are aware of right now. That number could be higher because I think this is the kind of problem that when you know that you have it, it's too late. You don't notice it when it's lesser, and you don't know, your water just tastes funny. Tolland is known for having weird water, you know, high iron and everything else. But as it progresses, sometimes it gets to the point that it's progressed so far that we can't really do much to fix it. And unfortunately, I think that's where we're at with this cluster of homes is the contamination level is so high, it is going to take more than my lifetime to to undo the damage to that aquifer. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I've got about 5 pages of notes from DPH meetings. Craig Patel is on here, who is from Connecticut Water, who's been involved in many of those meetings. He is also, they will be doing the work, the contractual work, but this is not a Connecticut Water pipeline. So there is no conflict of interest there. They're doing the survey and the interest. This will be floated through the Tolland Water Company, and it will be part of their system. But Connecticut Water is definitely set up to be able to do this engineering work. Tolland has, our water commission is volunteers. But we don't have the expertise to be able to do this sort of study that we need to facilitate this application. And it is up to 50,000 because we're not sure if there's going to be more cost associated with the application process. We are hiring a grants person and a project manager, but we don't know that, and as Lisa crosses her fingers, we don't know when that person comes on, if they'll be ready to jump right into handling this application. It is a very onerous application process. So the up to $50,000 is a minimal amount of the 4 million that we received, and the 4 million that we received specifically states use for water, sewer, and broadband initiatives. So any questions anybody has, I'd happily answer.
All right, Tammy, thank you. And before we open up the floor to council members, I just wanted to make a clarification. I know we have a lot of interested parties on the line here. So this agenda item is to fund a study that will determine the extent of the tainted well issue we have here in town and help us all gain a better understanding of the scope of the problem. A lot of questions have come in and we need good answers to these questions, but these questions that came in that are part of our packet are not relevant to this particular agenda item. These questions become relevant once the council decides to take action and if we start to do work in order to remediate these tainted wells. So I think it's important to understand that. This agenda item will only fund a study so we can better understand the problem. Okay, so with
I
that,
agree, John, and it will also give us alternatives. It'll give us, you know, whatever alternatives they see that they can offer and the cost for those to try to help there.
very good. So let's open it up to council members who have any questions.
Mr. Vice Chair, I think that Lisa had something that she wanted to add in. She was trying to raise her hand before, but
Sorry about that, Lisa, please.
That's okay. I didn't officially hit the raise hand thing. Certainly in your packet, this was another thing that I included. There was a lot of questions that I had received from one of the council members a couple nights before the meeting. And I started responding to all of them and felt that you all should be able to see it, because if the questions were raised at the meeting, at least you'd have something to run through with your fingertips. Again, it's nothing that I expected you to read and get an understanding of. It was my understanding that these questions might arise, and I wanted to make sure you all got copied on information that I shared with one council member. And going forward during my manager's report, I think I want to chat about how we proceed with things like this in the future, because I want to make sure that everybody is communicated with and make sure that I'm giving everyone the information they need to make the decisions. One of you may have excellent questions and may not have thought of them, and another one may not have thought of them, and sharing it. Certainly the place to bring up the questions is in the council meeting for all to share and discuss. For me to have them ahead of time helps to see if we have time to be able to respond to them it gives me the opportunity to at least try to have responses for questions that will come up during the meeting. I think that's probably the better forum to make sure questions are answered and that everyone has the same opportunities and understanding. So, we could probably talk about that later on, but what I wanted to basically say is that, yes, there is a lot of information that was shared with you. And it's certainly just if questions come up, there's things to at least refer back to. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Counselor Murray.
Thank you. What are we being asked to agree to? Can that be specified? Because Lisa referred to a few things, Councilor Nuccio referred to a few other things, and I'm not really sure what's being asked of us.
Do you want me to respond?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, at this point, the only thing that is being requested is to be able to move forward with applying for the loan. Not that we have to take it, but also to use $50,000 of the ARPA funds to pay up to 50,000, excuse me, because right now the quote is at a certain amount, but there could be other expenses incurred along the way. To allow us to get the information to be able to apply for that loan. Once we move forward and get a better feel, then that's where we would come back to council to say, okay, it's going to cost $20 million or $10 million. How do you want to go forward with this? There may be some money that comes in from federal funds. Some may have to be paid for through the town. Currently, there's other things that have to be considered through the Water Commission regarding their regulations. Usually when you're putting in a pipeline and someone connects to it, there's usually an assessment on the property if there's any residual funds that we're paying for, whether it be debt service or so forth. So those are the things that would have to be discussed once we have a feel for which way we're going with this.
So we're being asked,
You're not being asked to do that yet. You're just being asked to fund the cost assessment analysis study and for us to be able to move forward to see where we're going to head with the application.
So we are only talking about authorizing the cost assessment study. That's it. That's all these funds would be used for.
Right.
And the cost assessment study scope of work is what is included in our packet.
For now, that's what we have is for that one area of town. There may be other costs associated with preparing the loan application, as well as if it's determined that other areas are going to be looked at, there may be additional cost analysis costs forthcoming. So what we'd rather do, rather than having to try to fast track, is to be able to have up to 50,000. It would not be more than that, to be able to move forward with getting the process done because of the deadline that we're facing.
So you said right then you mentioned more things than just the cost assessment. So I again go back to my question, is what are we being asked to authorize this money to be used for?
So I would direct you, Ms. Murray, to the actual language in the agenda item here, and it just says consideration of a resolution authorizing $50,000 from ARPA to fund a study for well water concerns for potential application to the Clean Water Revolving Fund. So that's all we're doing. We're not coming up with any solutions now. We're trying to better define the problem to help us all better understand what we're with.
I'm sorry. Okay, so the only use then we are authorizing these funds for is for the study, if that's what the motion says.
That's my understanding, Lisa.
Yeah, and for the application process. I think Tammy also has input, if it's okay for you to share, that she could put some light on your question in more detail.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, Mrs. Hancock, that you were answering questions tonight.
I certainly can. What I was saying was that the funds will be for the cost analysis study, as well as any expenses related to applying for the loan. So if
Okay.
we had to do additional cost analysis of other areas or areas that may be in conjunction, those are the things that would possibly be looked at in order for us to apply for the loan. And actually, Craig Patla is here as well, and he could elaborate on the study if you would like to entertain that.
Yes, I have some questions specifically about the study. Would it be possible for us to get a better understanding of what expenses would be involved in applying for the loan?
Sure.
Thank you.
Craig, can I have you interject here?
Yeah, sure thing. I
Thank
just want to start off by iterating the fact that this is, and it's been said a couple times already, but this is really Connecticut Water Company working for the Tolland Water Commission in our role as a certified operator for the Tolland Water Commission. So this is as an agent of the Water Commission in the study of and the determination of the alternatives for the service provision to this area. So, and we offered our services through the many conversations with Tammy and Department of Health, and have subsequently had conversations with the Tolland Water Commission offering our services through a statement of work that first outlines who we are relative to the town, relative to the Tolland Water Commission, and what our role can be here. We do have extensive experience in working with and it is the state revolving fund. It's called SRF. It's not clean water. We have to make that distinction because oddly enough, clean water is sewerage. Drinking water is drinking water. So this is money for drinking water projects that Tammy had mentioned earlier. So what our statement of work, and I'm not sure if it was included in your package or not, but it outlines the work that we are proposing to prepare. And that will be, we will conduct a survey of existing data for the homes in the subject area to determine the outline, the perimeter, the geographical area of the contamination. With that information, we will have identified a target area for the water main extension. We'll conduct a high-level engineering study and alternatives analysis for bringing water and multiple routes to the subject area. Now, it has a lot of variables attached to it for a lot of the same reasons that Tammy mentioned earlier, because there are different point scores that can be attained by taking a certain route versus another, which makes it a more viable project in the eyes of the Department of Health, who are the administrators of the state revolving fund. So the higher the points total we can gain through the application process, the more viable the project becomes, the more able we are to apply for loan forgiveness portions of what would be the SRF program. Now, the SRF program, I should say, is typically a loan-only program, but through this fund, and the mention of $440 million is what I've heard too. I can substantiate that, but it is going to be applied over a 5-year period beginning in 2022. So we will do an alternatives analysis for variable routes to get to the problem area, and then we'll present that to this group and Tolland Water Commission so that the choice can be made on which route we want to choose. Then we'll conduct a cost estimate. Well, it'll be coincidental with this, a cost estimate as well for what the various routes could cost. Once we choose a given route, we will then work with the town to solicit to the affected homeowners their interest in it. Now, there's a lot of discussions that need to happen in between about how the balance of the 50% loan forgiveness will be paid. Will the town bond that? Will they localize assess that? How will all that be determined? And we will prepare an information packet to be presented as part of that solicitation to the homeowners in the affected areas to gain a level of interest. Once we have that level of interest and a positive response to the program and to the seeking of the loan, then we will initiate another agreement with the town and Town and Water Commission to initiate the application process itself. I've warned Tammy and many others along the way. It can be somewhat of a circuitous route here, and it can take some time, and it typically does. But if we can get a project like this on board with a 50% loan forgiveness component to it, which may even go higher than 50%, it's in all likelihood worth doing. But we have to determine that worth. We have to determine it first, and a study will make that determination.
All right, very good. Thank you, Craig. And the application process does not happen at all without this study. Is that correct?
The application process includes the high level engineering that'll be part of this. Let's just call it phase one of engineering for this project at this point. So it needs to be done as part of it, and we can do it within the timeline as prescribed. We heard that there'll be a call for projects sometime in the first quarter, and that call for projects will be open for a period of time. I have not heard definitively that that's going to happen in January, February, or at any point. But I would expect it to, with the idea that their typical time schedule is beginning to midsummer. They like to make a project list based on the applications received. So I would think that it would be sometime in that first quarter.
Very good. Ms. Murray, are you finished, or would you like to continue?
I do have a few additional questions. On the statement of work, it starts off at the very top. It's extension of water to the area referred to as the Vineyard, Tolland, Connecticut. Can you tell me what that geographic area is?
Well, right now it's only what I know through conversations with Tammy, and it's the area that's inclusive of, Tammy, help me out. It's Merlot Road,
Merlot, Chardonnay, Derrick, Buff Cap, Tolland Stage area.
Yeah,
It's the entire Vineyard area over there.
And I apologize. I don't know. I don't live on any of those roads you just mentioned. So if I understand this statement of work correctly, this will just cover this area known as the Vineyards in Tolland, and I'm trying to get an understanding of what that area is. So is it inclusive of the entirety of Merlot, Chardonnay, Buff Cap? I'm sorry, Derrick, there was, I might have missed one. Was there another street?
from our understanding of it right now, and Tammy knows more about this than I do at this point, because we have not gotten into the weeds of this thing as of yet, but there are a number of sample results from that area that determine the high levels of sodium chloride in the water there. We need to take those sample results, plot them on a map, and make a determination of the breadth of that entirety of the area. And that's what we'll do with information that's already available.
Sure,
If
I understand that.
If I may, Katie, if it will help, there are a couple of homes on Buff Cap. There are homes on Derrick Drive that would all be encompassed here. Merlot, Chardonnay, Slater, Zinfandel. These are all homes that have been reported through the Eastern Highland Health District and have had wells done, well testing done through DEEP. or are on our list also. So it's a combination of the Eastern Highland Health District list and the list that Tolland currently has.
So the study that I'm just trying to understand what we're authorizing. We're authorizing Connecticut Water to do a study of bringing water to the entirety of Merlot, Chardonnay, the entirety of Buff Cap. Is that correct?
It's just to conduct this study.
I understand, but
of that area, yeah, for that area.
But you keep saying that area, and I'm just trying to understand what you mean by that area.
I don't know what I mean by that area at this point. It's the area described as the vineyard right now that has the documented water quality issues, but we will utilize the information available at either local health deep or state department of health to make a determination of the entirety of the area.
Right.
Okay, so Lisa, if we're talking about entering into this contract that's included here, who makes the decision on what that area means?
I will need to negotiate that with Craig. I will have to sit down with him and go through all the documented areas that we're looking at. Once he plots it onto a mapping area, and then we go from there and make sure that the language within the final contract includes the entire areas that we pinpoint through this process. And I would probably also have input from Beverly, as well as Craig and Gene Costs, if there's anything that the Water Commission would be wanting to share on that information.
And is it typical for the council to enter into a contract where final details are decided after we vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Usually the council will give the town manager authority to negotiate a contract and move forward with it with, funding amounts not to exceed, things like that.
Sure, thank you.
Mhm.
I saw you talked about Mr. Patella, a lot of different things that you are going to be exploring. What's the timeline for this scope of work?
Well, we need to get it in complete for submission in for that call for projects. So it could be, if we started today, it would likely take us, 6 weeks or so to conduct a preliminary engineering. There's a lot of if-thens built into that, including the quality of the information, the level of information that exists today for the contaminated well sites. So presuming all of that information is readily available and able to be plotted, 6 weeks feels about right at this point.
And the town would provide this information? Is that correct? That would be
a combination
contingent?
of the town, local health, deep, and state department of public health as well has a number of data points available already for this.
Okay, so we're relying on all of those agencies to provide you sufficient information before you can start your 6-week time period.
It'll be included within that 6-week time period.
Okay, great. And does that 6-week time period include, Lisa, the time it would take you to negotiate a contract?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering how much not knowing how much the grant application process is going to cost or what's involved even in the grant application process. I'm wondering if we could maybe separate these two things out and perhaps authorize this study, which Connecticut Water would do. And we do have a price estimate for that of approximately $25,000. Separate from the grant application. Is that something we can do, Lisa?
At this time, I don't know what the amounts would be. So I was just coming forward what I felt was going to be the easiest and most efficient way with a lump sum not to exceed. And, obviously, if we don't need it, we're not spending it. But to keep coming back and forth to the town council could be quite inefficient to get anything done. So to separate it out, I mean, I could certainly share any, additional costs. We know we have the 25,000 now. If I were authorized to use up to 50,000, I could certainly report to the town council and say, okay, now we know we have another 10,000 for this, or we determined that this area now has to be included. So that may be another 10,000 or 5,000 or whatever it would be. But I really don't have those costs at this time, but I can certainly share the information as it becomes available, with knowing that I cannot go more than 50,000 and would not let us go more than 50,000 or more than 25,000 if it wasn't prudent to do so.
And if the town used these funds to do the study and apply for the grants, do we have to, does that commit us to using that grant and therefore expanding the water line?
No. And matter of fact, one of the additional fees that I didn't even think to mention is, we may even need assistance from Connecticut Water to help us put this application together. And there could be a cost with that. A new grants person coming online, if we're lucky enough to get anybody, because I'm not sure that's going to happen right away. We're going to need some help with putting this together because it's a very complex application. So, part of that additional cost could be for that purpose.
Okay, but I know when we were talking about the fire department grant, the SAFER grant 2 weeks ago, we learned that if we apply for the grant, we have to take it. And that I'm asking a similar question here.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, from my understanding, if we apply for it, we will not have to take it unless we decide to move forward with the project. Craig, is that from your understanding as well?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And then, Mr. Wilkinson, I see that you're on. You shared a public document with the council earlier this week about the number and the location of impacted properties. Councilor Nuccio referenced 19 properties in the area, this area of the vineyards, but I counted a much smaller number. I counted 11 on that list. I'm wondering if you could help me understand the difference.
Let me text him, make sure he might have stepped away for a minute. Hold on.
I may be able to help you with that, Katie. The list that I mentioned is a combination of the contaminated wells that have been reported to Eastern Highland Health District and the town of Tolland. They're not necessarily the same list.
Mr. Wilkinson told me that this was a list that was kept by Eastern Highland Health District, DEEP, and the town of Tolland, all combined into one list. It had 22 properties on it, and 11 of those properties were on streets that I think are in the vineyards, although certainly I'm not fully understanding that geography yet. So I was just wondering how the numbers are so different.
Well, if anything, this survey would vet that out, but the list that I have, as I mentioned, is from Eastern Highland Health District. All the wells that have been, that people may not have reported their findings to the town of Tolland. They may have just gone to the health district. So Eastern Highland Health District has, if I combine the two lists, it's 68 homes in the town of Tolland. There are 180 homes reporting contaminated wells in the state of Connecticut. 68 of them are in Tolland.
It sounds like that information didn't make it to the whole council. Would it be possible for that information to get distributed to the council, please?
I can absolutely forward it from my state email address. And let's see, I think Craig, you guys had that one, the meeting that we had with the DPH, but I have it. I can forward it.
Mike is back online, and we probably should at least bring him up to speed on this, but from my understanding, the list that Mike has is just what has been reported to the town and maybe through the local health area, not the State Department of Deep. So there could be other information out there, but I think the only list that he currently has is that local information. But Mike, can you comment on regarding the list? The concern that came up was that there was a reference made to 19 or 20 properties in the Vineyard area, and our list doesn't show as many, but there's other information that was shared that hasn't been shared with the council that is out there that we do not have, as far as I know, that documents that.
Yeah, sure. So we don't, with the town doesn't actually have a list. List we've only ever gotten is from Deep and EHD. So they decide who goes, what goes on that list, or, you know, it's really dependent on what properties are analyzing. So from what I've seen, it varied between 20 or 30 properties since that they started doing that list. So that's the only actual list I've ever seen. If there's other ones, I'm not aware of it. I mean, they may keep other ones themselves. You know, like Tammy said, I'm sure obviously they have a list of all the state ones, but you know, those are the ones that I'm aware of from the list, or at least the list I'm aware of.
We can't hear you, Katie.
Yes, thank you. I think it would be helpful if the council members, if all the council members were able to see the same information. I know Mr. Wilkinson shared with, I believe, the whole council a list, which is what I was going off of. I didn't realize that there was a different list that wasn't shared with the entire council.
The list has been sent. Everybody should have it in their emails.
I think I got it. So I'll just share it all off with all of you now, if that's okay.
I sent it to the whole town council. And if anything, it just shows that we have a larger problem than even what we have as the list here in Tolland. So
You sent the state
all of it's on there.
right? Yeah. Or did you? All right. You're in a meeting.
The other question the other questions I have are more related to the policy decision of expanding wells, expanding water service, as doing so, as I understand it, could potentially put a lien on every single property that is adjacent to the water line. And I understand we will talk about that more if we apply for the grant or if we receive the grant. So
Well,
those were the
point of
only
order,
questions.
Mr. Chair, that again, this is something where we're just deciding about the study, not against a policy. So I think that this is something that just as we discussed earlier, that we'd like to keep on track and that discuss the issue of the study itself and not necessarily any policy decisions or anything else that would be coming afterwards.
Absolutely. I was just finishing up. Thank you very much.
Yep. All set?
Yes, thank you very much.
Very good. Mr. Luba.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. So I think that this pointed to either Craig or, well, primarily to Craig, that this is something where, again, part of the study is to determine the scope of what's needed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's basically the study starts at a starting point of the known issues, but then expands out to determine if it goes beyond just the known identified problems. Is that correct?
We will be utilizing the data provided that's known data points now to make a determination of the affected area. Our scope of services does not include sampling of additional wells. If we did want to do that to make a determination, that would not be included in the original statement of work.
Okay. So that's something that you'd then after looking at that, if you felt it was something that was appropriate, that you'd come back and make that known to Ms. Hancock, who then could bring it back up before the council. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that again, that this is something that we're looking at approximately $50,000 out of, and this is directed to Lisa. We're looking at approximately $50,000 out of the $4 million in ARPA funds. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, and that that, I mean, putting it in terms of what we're looking at, I mean, along the terms of what something that Ms. Murray and I both are familiar with is with the Birch Grove Building Committee, that we set sort of a parameters of where we allowed the town manager to agree to contracts and agree to work within a certain parameter, which in this case, we'd be setting a $50,000 limit. So if it's something that falls between that 25,000 and 50,000 would be something that would be that would be within your purview. Is that correct, Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
All right. And putting this in terms, I mean, all of us have mentioned at one time or another during our discussions, issues that are very important that we want to see, especially when we were setting our goals about taking care of the town. It was that there was members that talked about the fire department, members that talked about the ambulance. We had a full discussion about wanting to take care of our town members through these services. And I can't think of anything that's more important than making sure that we help people that may have wells and may have issues regarding the use of their homes. I mean, if you can't even have drinking water, that's something that's, I think that we really need to take a look at. And that this study is something that it's not just a matter, we're not agreeing to do anything and we're not accepting responsibility for anything. We're not saying that there's anything other than we want to find out what's going on and why this is why this is happening, or not even why this is happening, but who's affected, so that we can then go forward and apply for federal grants or apply for other grants where I understand, Craig, that time is of the essence. Is that correct?
It is for this first round of funding.
So, and the longer that we wait, I mean, this could be another months or possibly a year after this before this opportunity would come up again, where these people are waiting that much longer before we can even start moving forward to even discuss possible solutions. Is that correct?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. And Bev, I know that that you've been involved in this process as well. Is there any comments that you wanted to have or added in your input regarding this and regarding the study?
I think we can't go forward until we get the cost analysis, like Craig has said. So that's really important. I support that because we won't know what we're talking about in magnitude of cost and that part. And the only other thing was to clarify the motion, if you get to the motion, the correct funding to the Department of Public Health in their funding source. And Gene Cost is on here too, because the Water Commission would have to be the applicant for the application process. It would have to go through and be managed by the Water Commission.
All right. So, but just so, you know, just again, so I understand, so that this is something we're just looking for the study, and that actually the scope that we're looking at right now is probably, it could possibly even be smaller than what the actual magnitude that we're looking at overall is, based upon the numbers, where it could be, you know, anywhere from the low number that Ms. Murray put forward of 11 to the high number of 22, or even more, as put forward by Ms. Nuccio, as far as the state's identifying 68 potential houses. So that's something that I think that we would need, that this study would help us identify that, then to be able to move forward so that we can then start applying for funding or start discussing some of the options for us to allow us to go forward with funding. Is that about accurate for either Bev or Craig?
So Craig, we're not going to do additional testing. We're basically, your scope of services, as I understand it, is to kind of give us a cost analysis, a high level engineering cost of getting to those areas.
Getting to those areas and covering the areas within the vineyard itself and any other areas that would determine through data points that we have contamination of the sodium chloride within those private wells in that area. What I've seen from the data so far, it's fairly concentrated in that area described as the vineyard.
Okay. But again, so this is something we're putting in perspective of the, you know, of other projects that we've done. like with Birch Grove and like with the firehouses and the studies that we've done with those, that we didn't come down to specific granularity saying this, thou shalt do this and only this, but we said that we are going to allow this study to be done so that we can see what the total scope could possibly be. So I think that's something that that I would support this, and I think that that if we're being honest about supporting our towns and supporting our neighbors and wanting to do the best for our neighbors, that out of everything, being secure in your home and being able to have water to drink and other things like that, I think that's something that we should at least take a look at and get the cost analysis so that we can determine the proper way to go forward and see what funding is available out there. Because I know in taking a brief look at certain things, there's federal funding, there's state funding, I mean, and federal funding through multitude of different agencies that could apply, which we need a study like this just to be able to go forward. And unlike other options where we still have, like with the firehouses, we still have operational firehouses while the projects are being done. And we still have operational ambulance services. And we had operational schools, even though they were in temporary modular schools, we still had the school being able to go forward. These people don't have drinking water, that they need to get this drinking water brought into them. They can't operate their houses. They can't operate normal things because of you know, how toxic the water is. I think that this is something that we need to be able to go forward with.
This is set up very intentionally so that the council will have subsequent opportunities and decision points along this journey. This is a logical first step so that we make a determination on the area and the cost so that the council can be better informed on the next decision point that we'll be asking them to make. So this is an absolutely logical first step of many that will be part of this project.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Bev. Thank you all. I would just ask the town council members to support this. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Luba. Ms. Udacek.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I think Tammy was out, right?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, can you hear me? I thought Tammy was next. No?
I don't have the ability to see who raised their hands first.
All right, I was no. Okay, I was just being.
That's right. Tammy was next. Council Yudichak, and then Sammy Khan is.
It doesn't matter. Go ahead, Colleen.
All right, I didn't want to cut you off or anything, Tammy. That's all. Sorry, I've been writing notes as we're going because we're getting a lot of good information coming in. So sorry if these are just all over the place. I know now some of these things we can't talk about really because we're just talking about this particular grant, and it's just strictly for a survey. When Tammy and I met for our first Arpa Subcommittee, we called it, or it was called a needs assessment. Now it's being called an engineering study. I don't know if there's a real difference between the two. I guess do question by question. So Ms. Hancock, could you answer what the difference is? Because a lot of things sound the same, because I know Tammy refers to it as a needs assessment. So I just want to be clear on what the difference is between the two.
Yep. Sorry, you broke up a little bit, but I think I understand what you're asking is the difference.
Sorry, I think I'm losing my voice. So sorry.
No, it keeps flicking in and out. But
okay.
That language was being used a lot during the meeting, but the true description of what needs to be done is an engineering cost analysis, which is eventually going to get to providing for the needs of the area. So
I was sorry to cut you off. So does that mean though that, like, I don't know, I'm just putting a number out there, 500 homes out in that area, will every door be knocked on and be like, we're going to check your home to see if you have a problem? Or is it strictly just first, thank you, Tammy, for the new list too, or are we just looking at these houses because some of these houses are not in the vineyard? So what about those people that are having difficulties as well?
Craig, do you care to respond to that one?
Well, I can. I'm afraid I'll be disappointing in my response here, but I just don't have the information of the breadth or scope of this area yet. We just haven't been able to dig into the information beyond what was provided to us very precursorily through the informational meeting that we did have with Tammy and the Department of Health. So we will take the data that's available, as stated. And if there are more sample points that need to be gotten, we'll need to work with the town to get that sampling done. We as Connecticut Water, we just don't have access to these folks in their homes or even their contact information. They're not customers of ours, so we don't have means of contacting them. So we would need to work with the town to identify the who, the where, and which homes would need to be tested as part of this, if any.
And in respect to that, that would encompass us getting a questionnaire together that would go out to the residents.
To all those residents though, or just, I guess, the affected resident? You know what I mean? Like, somebody might have a well problem, unfortunately, but the neighbor next door might not. So are you gonna go to that next door neighbor and be like, we want to check your
Well,
property out?
here's what would happen if water does eventually get brought into that neighborhood because one neighbor may have a well concern or issue. The water line will be available for everybody in that neighborhood. So if they have a problem with their well or determine at a later date, they will be able to look into whatever water line that's brought there. As far as the study that hasn't been actually put together as of yet. So there wasn't anything about knocking on doors and checking out there. As far as a survey being sent out, I think we need to work closer with Connecticut Water to determine how we will be sending out any sort of survey, if it would just be in the areas of the mapping that we come up with the various points that they have for information from all the sources that we have. And do we, try to send out a survey into that area, or do we just survey the entire town? And if we do that, then, maybe at least we'll find out if there's any other areas that we're not aware of. I don't know.
Lisa,
The one
maybe
thing is,
sorry.
wait a minute, Bev. The other concern here is that there are other parts of town where the town does not own the water system. So where that is concerned, we really can't we can't take a loan and try to deal with providing water to those areas that are not serviced by the town system. I'm sorry, Beverly, do you want to?
I was just gonna say that Craig could probably address how in another community they worked on the survey and they surveyed the residents along where they were gonna extend the water main. So maybe he should clarify more what Connecticut Water means by a survey than what it's not surveying the whole town or every resident. Correct, Craig?
Yeah.
I'm saying like not the entire town, but if we're
Yeah.
talking about the vineyards, that area, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying the
I
side
understand.
of Coventry, but yeah.
Yeah, and really, we do take Department of Health's guidance on this because part of the one of the initial threshold tests that you have to make to be even eligible for this SRF funding is a demonstration of significant water quality issues. If we've got 68 tests that show that there are significant water quality issues in this given area, that I would look to the Department of Health and say, is this good? Is this going to get us over the threshold? And my sense is if it's 68, that they're going to say this is a go. And in other words, it's a go. Go on, continue with your design and your initial cost estimate to move forward with it. Now, as part of a project that I'm involved in this day in Naugatuck, we were in regular communication with the people out there. Now, there was a fair amount of desperation for I would call it the minority. The rest of the people weren't sure if they had water issues or not. We offered to do, well, actually, it was the local Department of Health out there offered to do testing for those other homes. And when they made a determination that they did have water quality issues, it bettered the chance for the application that we were working on. Now, there were 61 homes in this development. Ultimately, only 45 of them chose to sign in for the project. And that's fairly typical, but it's still significant enough for the Department of Health to take notice of it and want to utilize their funding mechanism to solve a problem like this. So again, we work hand in hand with the Department of Health on projects like this, and we'll take their guidance each step of the way.
Okay, I don't know how many questions I get to ask, but I'll try and go back. What's that? Okay.
The floor is yours. The floor is
All
yours.
right, I didn't know if there's a time limit, and I know a lot of people have questions. So, like the Birch Grove, how you had the building committee and they did a great job, would it be worthwhile to have somebody part of this so they get updates, or would you report back to the Arpa committee or subcommittee and then they report back, just so there's always somebody involved, just like Birch Grove, or is that really not a good idea?
Once the process is completed by Connecticut Water, I would certainly be reporting back to the town council as a full body, since they authorized the use of the ARPA funds. I would be, reporting back to them, determining, where we're headed next. If, we applied for the grant, I'd get you to the point of, here's what the study showed, here's what the analysis showed. I'd give you a report on that. And then, once we determine, and I keep calling it a grant, and I know I'm not supposed to call it a grant because it's not a grant, but it could turn into one sort of. But, once we get approved and we know just where that is going to head, then we'd come forward to the town council to get direction as to, where we're going. Right now, all we're doing, I'm sorry, my emails are popping up. All we're doing is we're just doing the study or the cost analysis right now. Once we move any forward, then we'll bring back more to you.
Okay, and then just realized you said, someone said it, that the water company is only really part of the town. So what I know we really want to worry about these people, but I always also concerned about some of these people that are on the other part that might not have access to the water company in town. So how would that work? So do those people don't get water, like, because like my side of town doesn't have the water company, right? So say if somebody out in this area, that might be on this list somewhere, what happens with them?
We would have to try to figure out how that could go forward. That probably would be more of the state or Connecticut Water being involved with their customers, or if the state is going to try to provide any input or assistance to Connecticut Water to help them move in that direction. There may be other alternatives that we could try to, work together with them on, but currently, we really have no control over how Connecticut Water puts their lines in. And we just would have to see how it would go.
We would work with the town to identify those areas as well and work on a funding opportunity to solve those issues as well. Lisa.
Thank you.
Let me just see if I have any, a lot of these questions I know Ms. Murray had and Ms. Luba had, so if you don't mind, just quickly run down my. I'm sorry if this was answered earlier. So say if we don't use all the $50,000, if that's what we all vote on tonight, does that money come back to us? Like if there's 10,000 left over, does that come back to our $4.2 million? How's that?
Yeah, yep, no, actually, the money is spent right out of that fund. So whatever is not spent just stays in the fund.
Okay, so you pay as you go.
Right.
Basically? Okay. I think right now it's all I have, John. So
Very
hopefully,
good.
do we get a second round? I don't know if I have follow-up questions, but thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Nuccio.
Thank you. So we're kind of spiraling down Alice's hole here, which I respect the questions and all that. I'm just wanted to circle this back to, these are people who do not have water. They do not have drinkable, potable water in their homes. They can't get up in the morning and just click on their faucet and make a cup of tea. We're asking the council to consider $50,000 out of 4.2 million to do a survey to figure out what options we have to try to help with that. It's the survey. We're not committing the town to anything else. After that survey, we have the opportunity to review all the options and to decide if we're going to move forward, if we're not going to move forward. And we have many decision points, like Craig said, along the way before we get to any kind of commitment. But we can't even have those conversations without doing this survey. We can't get into the process. And if we delay this, it means we can't come back to it for a year. Because typically the fund opens in January for projects. So if we decide to postpone this or not do this or wait and all of that, then we're looking at telling all of these people again for another year that they have to wait. To
Tammy,
me,
I
this
just want
is
to interject. I just want to
it's-
interject. I mean, we're asking questions.
I think I have the
All
floor.
we're doing,
Colleen.
you're making
Colleen,
it
I
seem
think I
like,
have the floor. If to me, this is, you know, I have no problem with asking questions. I'm just pointing out to me that if we decide to not do this right now, we're jeopardizing the timeline to be able to get the survey done, to be able to apply for the money that's coming from the government. So if we're going to ask questions, I would hope that we can do it. And if we don't decide on this tonight, then we hold a special meeting so we can stay within the timeline to get the funding sent forward for the application, if nothing else, to at least find out what the options are. To me, this is, you know, it's $50,000 out of 4.2 million. And in that 4.2 million, it specifically says for clean water initiatives. So it's not going to take away from another opportunity or another initiative. It's up to $50,000. We get to do the survey, and then we can decide what, if anything, the town does after that. So I'm just asking that the council considers that this is time sensitive and that it is what, 1%, if that, of the 4.2 million that we have to do a study to figure out what options the town might have to help the residents with this. That's just my 2 cents on it.
John, I'd like to respond to that. I mean, we all care about our residents. We have every right to ask these questions. I mean, we got a lot of documentation. Yes, it's 50,000 out of $4.2 million, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't ask these questions. There's a lot of other residents that have these questions as well.
Right. Nobody's saying not to ask any questions. We're still going through the circuit here. And that brings us to Mr. Khan.
You have to unmute Counselor Khan.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I do not have a problem with spending $50,000. That's number one. I received those emails, and the only comments I have to Lisa as the interim town manager, Tommy as a state rep, and Craig. First of all is if the people does not have drinking water for last 7 years, where have you been, guys? That's number one. Number two, Craig, is your responsibility, only responsibility to supply the water and make money on it? Two. Number three, Tommy, is like if the people does not have water to drink or to take a shower or to do anything, do we ever consider talking about fire department or turf field? Make a choice. Thank you very much. That's about it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I am not seeing any hands. Do any other councilors have further? Ms. Murray.
I do have a couple follow-up questions, but I'm wondering if Councillor Khan's questions are going to be answered.
I can
Well,
respond.
for- The question to me, it's not, again, it's not our water system. It's Tolland Water Commission system there, so we're not selling water there.
But you are supplying the water and
No,
make a profit on that, right?
no,
Who's doing that?
that would be the Tolland Water Commission who owns the system there. We're contracting with Connecticut Water to do this analysis because they're the best company that could provide what we need in order to do the application. This is Tolland Water that would provide the water to that area. Because that system is in that area. As far as where was I was not involved in this prior to this. This is all since I've come on board as far as trying to move forward with managing this. The Representative Nuccio was involved when she took leadership in her representative position to try to move forward to get some sort of attention to this area on a state level. I can't speak to where we were in the past.
Sammy, I can tell you, Sammy,
Sammy,
I can tell you,
one second, please. 1 second, please. 1 second, 1 second. I used to live in a Stone Pond, and they had a water problem for about 7 months. And I can feel the pain of those people. I mean, you're talking about 7 to 10 years without it and without the water. They're still there. And then I am sorry for those people, and I'm sorry for myself that I'm part of this. And we are still talking about it and not getting anywhere. It's like, even though if we do something about it, we are talking about at least a couple of years. Stop this nonsense. I mean, DEP, state, or whatever. It's like, we have to do something for those people. We have to. Thank you.
Sammy, I can tell you, I've been working on this since, I think if you go back to the minutes, I think it was my first week on council, so 5 years. I've been trying to get attention on this. And it was also one of the first things I started working on in my state rep role, because I have been hearing residents for years and years talk about this problem. And I'm on the Eastern Highland Health District Board, and first meeting there, I complained about it there too, to try to get some kind of resolution. So this is a deeply personal issue to me. I don't have these problems, but I have people stopping me all over the place to talk to me about it. And I have been doing everything that I possibly can to bring awareness to it, which is why I'm so adamant and passionate about doing a $50,000 survey that will enable us to apply for unprecedented opportunity of grant money to try to resolve it. So I hear you 100%. And I can tell you that I've been here since my first day elected, trying to get it fixed.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to Ms. Murray.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that I definitely agree with what Councillor Luba said earlier, and what Councillor Khan has said. I think pretty much everyone has said at this point that we do have a responsibility to help our residents, and not having drinking water, working water in their house must be very difficult. And to me, it's not really an acceptable place for my friends and neighbors to be. I appreciate the explanations that were given to us, as I believe the council is responsible for fully understanding everything that we approve or don't approve. And I really appreciate that Mrs. Hancock and that Mr. Patella were here tonight to be able to answer these questions. I'm sorry, Ms. Bellady as well. So thank you very much for being here to help answer these questions that we had based on the information in the packet. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Let's go to Mr. Luba.
I'll try and be as brief as possible. I mean, everybody knows that I'm one about due diligence, and I want to make sure that we do our right thing, that we're good stewards of our money and everything else. Time is of the essence. We're doing our due diligence by approving this study. I 100% with Councilor Khan. We've done it long enough. We've talked about it long enough. Let's move forward. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Lisa, I'm not seeing any more hands. Do any other councilors have any further questions or discussion items?
How about, do you need any input from Gene Costs at all? I don't even know if he's still here.
If you'd like to say something, that's fine.
I actually don't see him any longer. I don't know.
He's
Okay.
muted.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Gene. Do you have to unmute, please?
Okay.
Gene, do you have anything that
Well,
you'd like to add?
well, much has been covered. And the Water Commission has had an operations and maintenance relationship with Connecticut Water for many years. It's not because they're the only alternative, but they happen to be the best for Tolland's water systems. And I think, to be very quick about comments, what you're discussing and are going to vote on is whether you wish to spend $50,000 for some initial survey work, some planning, and then enough information so that if there is a desire to go forward and build something, you will have enough for a grant application. That's what the $50,000 is for. There are lists in town halls with some addresses. This area that Ms. Nuccio has brought up is a pocket with a significant number of houses. Yes, there are others in Tolland that are on lists that have unhealthful water, perhaps, but some of them, they're not here. And in fact, some of them are in neighborhoods that are served by another water company. So if you go back to what you were presented, it's a $50,000 study that could lead to a solution to a problem or not, but you can't get to a grant application without doing the survey work.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. That being said, thank you, Mr. Koss. The vice chair will entertain a motion of consideration of a resolution authorizing $50,000 from ARPA to fund an engineering cost analysis study for well water concerns for potential application to the Clean Water Revolving Fund.
Oh, hold on one second.
Need
We
to
just
modify that.
The language.
It's called drinking water state.
Water State Revolving Fund.
It should be the
Say that,
state.
say that again.
revolving- state
Need to make an
revolving fund.
amendment. I'll make an amendment, Vice Chair, to say we need that, we need to amend the or actually, I don't have to read the resolution as it's stated here. I can just say the drinking water. I'll make the make a motion that the following resolution be resolved, consideration of a resolution authorizing $50,000 from ARPA to fund an engineering cost analysis study for well water concerns for potential applications to the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund.
Is that 50,000 or up to 50,000?
Up to 50,000.
Thank you.
Lulu, I'll second that motion.
I got it, Lou.
Oh, sorry.
Katie got me off. Sorry, I think I'm getting sick.
All right, Colleen can second.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's have a roll call vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a question about the
Oh,
motion
discussion,
before
I'm sorry.
us.
Yeah.
Does this motion include applying for the grant?
Uh-oh, somebody's echoing. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Does the motion that we made authorize the town or the town manager to apply for the grant?
I think it should be amended to include that, in my opinion.
And the $50,000 will be sufficient to cover the engineering study and the grant application.
I think that, if I may, Mr. Chair, I think that that was something that was discussed and included during our discussions, that the study would include the application. I think that's clear in the minutes. And so I don't think that we need to amend the motion. I think that the study, the study as stated before, specifically said that it included the application process.
I rescind we have a motion on the floor and a seconded motion, so I am rescinding my motion and will re-motion consideration of a resolution authorizing up to $50,000 from ARPA to fund an engineering cost analysis study for well water concerns and application to the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Is that right now, Lisa?
Yeah. I think that just.
Had to remember all that.
When you live something long enough, Colleen, you remember it.
Okay. So we have an amended motion on the floor with a second. I'm not sure who made that second. Did anybody catch that?
It was Colleen.
Colleen, okay, very good. So what we'll do is we'll go to a roll call vote. Ms. Nuccio,
Yes.
Mr. Luba,
Aye.
Mr. Khan,
Aye.
Ms. Udacek,
Aye.
Ms. Murray.
Aye.
I am an aye. That passes unanimously. And if we could, Lisa, somehow notify Mr. Jones that we would love to welcome him back to this meeting.
Let me give him a quick text. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair Regan. Thank you for Lisa for reaching out to me, let me know I could return. And thank you for everyone. I was away briefly, but thank you for everyone for a very thorough discussion. With that being said, we'll move to item 8.4, which is the consideration of a resolution to approve the town council goals for 2021 to 2023. I will go ahead and share my screen to show those goals as outlined from our two-part session. All right. So this is a quick summary. Lisa, if you'd like to go ahead and just review the goals, and then if there are any discussion points, counselors can bring those up at that time.
Okay, these are the final goals that after we went through them, any language changes that you wanted added or things removed, this was the final document that was put together. Do you want me to go through each and every one of them, or?
No, you don't have to. If that's the base level of the summary, I think I already see a Counselor Nuccio's hand is up. So
Okay, I'm available to answer.
okay, so we'll go through for discussion. Councilman Nuccio.
Okay, can you scroll down, please, Steve, to the
Yeah.
last section?
Is
Right.
that section the process
Nope.
notes or?
Up a little bit more. Mine are consistency things. First, can we lowercase the A through D like the rest of the file and not bold them in section 4? And I'm gonna make one final bid to remove Roman numeral lowercase 1, increase commercial economic development and create balance within all types of grand lists, and just leave the 1 and 2 there, because those are things that we can actually influence and do.
Hold on one second. Let me just write this down. Lowercase under
A through D, like the rest of the file. It's just standardized as the rest of the file,
Why that went that way?
and don't bold it, because the other ones aren't bolded either.
All right. And then what else did you say?
Remove that lowercase Roman numeral 1, increase commercial and economic development, create balance within all types of grand list properties with this effort. We can't do that, but we can do actual number 1 and 2.
Okay, so just delete little I, whatever it
Yep.
is.
That would be my suggestion to the council. We can do 1 and
Why
2.
is
We
the-
cannot do lower Roman numeral number 1. Holy moly! It's like,
Roman number, well, whatever it is, I or Roman 1. I think 1 and 2, we're supposed to try to address that little I.
well, right,
That's
and
where
those are the
that
things we
was
can
going.
do. We can review and explore becoming more actively involved in the ongoing partnerships, et cetera, et cetera. But we cannot increase commercial and economic development. Town council has no control over either. And we cannot create balance within the grand list. But we can do 1 and 2. That's just my suggestion for the town council to kind of mull over.
The rest of you are good with that? I can remove it. If the rest of you are good with me doing the little, removing the bold and all that, just if someone is against it, just let me know.
I'm not seeing any objection. Is
I
there
get
anyone that has a significant concern with that? Just notating for A, it does seem as though there's some comparable language in terms of the balance of open space, residential, and economic development that, we certainly, I think, understand that 95% of our town is zoned for residential. So it would be assumed creating more balance would be trying to increase economic development. It's more kind of implicit knowledge, but I would be okay with that being stricken and just sticking with 1 and 2 being kind of the activities under the balancing of open space, residential, and economic development.
I agree.
Yep, I'm seeing no objection, Lisa. So that is okay to have
little I and
take it. Yeah.
all right.
And then I see Councilman Nuccio's hand is down, so Councilman Nuccio.
Just under process notes. To set and review timelines. I know during the year, come back and measure those goals, I guess, but should we set those timelines now, like every 3 months or 6 months, you know what I mean? So we're held accountable for making sure we're following what we set to put down as our goals. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone be opposed to having the set review timeline for our goals being perhaps one year from the effective or the approved date of the goals? So in that case, it would be probably either in December or January, we would do a review of those goals.
Could we do it in 6 months instead of 12?
We could also do 6. We could have it be every 6 months just to do a quick overview. If no one's opposed to that being firmly established. Not seeing any opposition, I would be okay with that being added, Lisa. So setting review timeline to be once every 6 months.
From 12/28, well, start January 1st. So
Yeah, we can say the effective, you know, we would do a review in June and then another in December and then another the following June.
that's fine.
Okay. All right, seeing no other discussion then, I would entertain a motion to approve the draft resolution as outlined in 8.4.
Lulu, I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Councilor Luba. Is there a second?
Katie
Second.
Murray, I'll second.
Oh, Katie, you have it.
Seconded by Councilwoman Murray. We'll do a roll call vote.
I just asked
Councilor
a
Murray?
question. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Um,
Go ahead, Councilor Yudichak.
Does that motion include the changes by Ms. Nuccio and myself, or
Yeah,
just
so I'll
does what-
clarify. I'll clarify the motion entertained was to approve the draft resolution as amended. Based on our discussions and the interim town manager providing or receiving feedback and editing the document. So I'll restart the roll call vote. So Councilman Murray,
Yes.
Councilman Yudichak,
Yes.
Councilor Luba,
Aye.
Vice Chair Regan,
Aye.
Councilman Nuccio,
Aye.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
and I am an aye, so that is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Just gonna stop sharing for a brief moment, get back to the agenda. So we are on item 8.5, appointments of vacancies on various municipal boards and commissions. There are none at this time. Item 9, there is no old business, so we'll move on to item 10, report of the interim town manager. And I know, Lisa, I think you said at the outset of the meeting you had some updates to provide, so
Yep.
take it away.
A few things. Number one, I know some of you may have heard through the governor's announcement yesterday that the state is going to be providing some COVID at-home test kits. I was on the governor's conference call yesterday, and have been working with staff to arrange pickup of those tests and coordination of getting it communicated with the public, as well as activating CERT and other staffing needs to make it all happen. If all goes well, we will be able to pick up the tests on Thursday from the state supply warehouse where they're going to have it. Now, we're hoping that everything's going to come through as planned, and we will be sending out a communication and e-blast to the public. We'll get things out on Facebook to try to get the information out there as much as possible. I'm working on a draft press release after this meeting that John Lytle has helped draft up, and I'll be finalizing it, and we'll be getting that out to the public. So there will be a limited amount of tests. It's based on our population. Each kit comes with two at-home tests. This is the governor's role to try to get more tests out there because it's just been so difficult for either to get testing at testing centers or even to purchase them in drugstores or wherever you can get them. So we're gonna get those tests out. Also, there'll be some masks that we're also trying to get and can be distributed if there's certain businesses, residents that will need masks. We'll try to get that distributed also. So that's what's going on there. One of the other things I talked about this evening is I want to find a way to make sure that I'm communicating properly. And I don't, I apologize for adding things to the agenda at the last minute. It wasn't, again, like I said, to make sure that everybody read it all at once. And I can understand how frustrating that could be, seeing a document that's much larger than you originally received. But my concern is I want to make sure I share information that's going to help all of you make the right decisions, or at least have informed decisions, the right information to do that. Some of you share questions with me ahead of time. And by all means, I think that is good. There may be concerns, how could I say it? We may have some problems with trying to respond to those. And at least if I have them ahead of time, I could take every effort that I can to get those responses. But I want feedback from you. I'm thinking the best forum may be to give me your questions if there's an agenda item, and then we bring them up in the meeting. But if you give them to me ahead of time, at least I can try to get answers. But rather than responding to one person, then another person, and then someone else pipes, not pipes in, shares information, it might be easier just to have it at the council meeting for discussion by everybody. Unless you have objections to that. I certainly, if you have one or two questions that you need a quick answer, that's one thing. But if it's, if there is a lot of information that's going to really be helpful to other people, it's probably best for me to respond to the group as a whole rather than trying to share it, 2 days before an agenda and then revise the agenda. That was wrong. And again, that won't happen again. And nobody asked me to share that. That was just my decision, trying to say, okay, I think everybody needs to know about this. And I wanted to make sure it was in the packet so that if we did refer to any of it, that the public would also have access to it, because I know there have been concerns in the past that the public also wasn't able to see what we were looking at and discussing. So that was my logic of trying to make that all happen. So I just kind of want to hear some feedback as to how you think that would work. If you think that would be appropriate, I'm open to suggestions, but I really want to be able to make sure that I communicate with everybody and meet your needs. Anything?
All right, so I see Councilor Khan followed by Councilman Nuccio.
Mr. Chair, that's and Lisa, there's only two requests. It's a request. Number one, I love to have a town hall meeting. That's number one. And if you can arrange that, that I can hear people what their problem is, or send it. Whether Tolland people has a problem or whatever the issues are, I love to have them, and maybe I can answer them. That's number one. Number two is that would be really helpful for me because I'm new to this. If you can give me some, whenever you can send some agenda, is there any way I can have some something back up to it, some kind of summary or some kind of other information. So I'll get a more knowledge and then maybe I can talk more rather than just sit back and listen to others. Thank you.
Regarding the town hall meeting, I think the chair probably will want to discuss that with Sammy as to see, because we've never done that before, having, usually the chair has a council hour, and I think you usually share your information with your other
Doesn't
commissioners,
it
but-
doesn't have to be related to council. It could be planning zoning, it could be a ADC, it could be XYZ, and whomever wants to attend it, they can, and they can answer the question. Answer a question. It's just like it's a question, answering a question. That's about it. Nothing is more, but if we can help a residents, we'd love to do that.
So I do think that is a good idea, and I think perhaps taking time to maybe invite the interim town manager to those events if they are available. It's usually the first Thursday of every month. I know in the past, chairs have invited leadership from planning and zoning or the Board of Education. I think we could expand that to be an open invite, as long as we don't have a potential quorum of any particular board or commission. We could expand that invite to have chairs of other boards and commissions attend, so that residents are aware that they could reach out to that person and know and learn from them. So I think that's a good point. And then I do agree with Councillor Khan. It would be ideal to have one-pager summaries of any supporting documents when possible, or at least it should be a bare minimum. If it's anything that's a kind of a supporting document, there should be probably a one-pager or less that's a summary of what the information is that can provide a narrative to why it's relevant to our deliberations.
At this time, I can tell you, we will certainly try to do whatever we can do. One of the other things I wanted to share is that we're having some issues with COVID, and I may not have the staff to be able to accommodate answering questions in a timely manner or getting a lot of backup in a timely manner. So I would hope that you would just bear with me. But currently we're kind of on a bare bones staff right now.
Absolutely. I think, myself and Vice Chair Regan, when we're establishing agendas, if there are times where, due to extenuating circumstances with COVID, if we don't think we can effectively establish enough supporting documents and summaries for materials, we can postpone certain items to be discussed when it's better for staff to be able to provide the best summaries possible.
And that's the other thing. At the agenda week, we should probably set a date and time with a standing Zoom meeting between you, John, and I. If maybe you guys could get together and maybe give me the best time that would work for you, that we could go through the agenda and just make sure, what's there is there, and that's it.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's just a learning curve of things, and but I think I'd like to do that. So and another recommendation that also was shared with one other council member was to and this takes a tremendous amount of effort. So it's something we could try to do, but I'm just not sure we're going to be able to accommodate. And it had to do where if we may have mentioned, like, the Board of Ed had a meeting on December 2nd and discussed this. It was suggested that we put a link to those minutes in the document, and just being able to have the staff time available to try to look up those links and put them into the document. It does take quite a bit of time. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. My staff is at the point right now where they're challenged just to meet the deadline to get the document out as it is now. And as you could see, we had a lot of other additions that didn't help matters either. So I'm just not sure if that, if that's something that the entire council really wants. We can make an effort, but it would take a lot of extra time that I just don't know if I'm going to have the staff to do it.
No, that's fair. And I think perhaps in our capacity as liaisons, sharing any pertinent links with the leadership, the chair and the vice chair, and say, this might be a pertinent document that could be included. If we're willing to provide brief summaries, or at least share the why, that then if it goes to your office, Lisa, that
that would be a lot.
It's probably more beneficial.
If you had that would be helpful, very helpful. When we're trying to put it all together. Thank you. The other thing is we did interview for a grant manager position. We're still negotiating.
Oh, sorry, Lisa. I don't want to interrupt. I don't know if Councilman Nuccio had their hand up, but they were looking to provide input on your initial request for feedback.
I apologize. Go ahead.
No worries.
Okay, Lisa, I get it. I just wanted to be so bold as to make a couple of suggestions. What you mentioned in the beginning, Lisa, is it's very important. I know being on the council for this is my 5th year now. When Steve was here, our thing was basically when the agenda came out, if there was something you had questions on, I would send him my questions. We might have some back and forth, but it was always known that anything that I sent to him was going to be asked in a meeting, because we're supposed to do all of our business in public. So asking a question about, hey, can you tell me about this, or can you tell me about that, is all fine and well, and trying to not do too many of that. But it was key that it helped facilitate him knowing I'm going to ask these questions, and then making sure that there are people there, whether it be Scott or John or anybody else that could answer those questions. And that all of that kind of, he knew what was coming from my questions, and he knew what to provide at the meeting. So not only I was learning about it, but the whole town was learning about it.
And
so
that's
perhaps something like that would be beneficial. Like, you're going to get one-offs from us or texts or whatever to say, hey, can you give me some more info on this or info on that? But for the most part, whatever we're asking, we should be sure that we're asking it in public, and that you have enough time to plan for it. Because otherwise we're asking you questions and you don't have the resources here to answer it. And then we have to put it off and wait till you get the resources or the information. And I think maybe that would be helpful. Would that be something that would be good for you?
Well, that's exactly what I was asking. But, the other thing is, some stuff I may be able to respond to right away. And other stuff, it may take me a week to get a response for. And if your meeting is in 2 days, I'm not going to be able to provide it in a timely manner. And, I know there's such a short turnaround between when you get the agenda packet and when the meeting comes about, and having the time to go through it. I know there's a lot that all of you have to do as well. So it's just a juggling of, what I can respond to and what I can't. But, my goal is to have the right people available and to have the right answers available. Otherwise, I may just have to say, I'll get back to you,
Absolutely.
I hate to do that, but, I'd rather have the answers for you.
And my second suggestion would be, I totally understand what you're saying. My second suggestion would be, what I did with Mike is, when we looked at our goals and we looked at what we're going to do, we had the next 5 town council meetings planned up. We had a running Word document of, we're going to deal with this here, this there, this here, this there. And then, it was always light enough that we could handle the stuff, because there's all the town regular things that have to occur that the council doesn't necessarily track and know about. You guys come to us and tell about. So we always had a little bit of wiggle room with any agenda to add 1 or 2 things in that were the town priorities. But when we met, we would sit down and go through, like, I still have the Word documents where we would say, here's the things that we have to get through, and how do we balance that with budget and everything else. And we would have a Word document of exactly what was going to be on the agenda. If something urgent came up, then we look to, can we bump something else or not? Because otherwise, you know, we're at meetings till midnight because we're trying to get in all of the different things. So I would just say as a suggestion point, perhaps that's something you guys can look at to kind of come up with. We've just decided what our goals are. So what does that mean in terms of meetings? What things do the town staff know about? What do you know about, Lisa? And what do you, John and Steve, know about to
Sure.
say what's important items you want to deal with, and then create the next, just start out with the next 3 meetings. You know, what do you want to hit in that? How many topics? And then just keep adding to it. As something moves, you move it to the next one or not in that. Because otherwise, like you said, Lisa,
Yeah, we actually do have that. And I use it as a moving tool all the time.
yeah.
And certainly we'll be sharing that with John and Steve. I have the next quite a few meetings. I'm going into February where I'm juggling different topics that we talked about. So, you know, originally this meeting was very light, and then all of a sudden,
Yeah, that it blows up, right? And that happens. Like I
Yeah.
said, Mike and I would meet at least once a month
yeah,
to go over calendar and what's coming up.
yep. And I have all that
You
together.
probably have all my old Word document, like floating.
I don't know. I have one that I've been using and I constantly update, or I have Megan or Lynn update. As I find out about different things, I add it to the list and figure out which meeting it could go on. And then I run it by Steve and John as to when I'm putting the agenda packet together.
So those are my only 2 suggestions. Thank you for humoring me.
No, thank you. Those are valued suggestions, and I think it's something I did communicate with Lisa when we were going back and forth when this initial issue came up. Is kind of creating a New Year's resolution to get time, ideally on Tuesdays, to meet for a half hour or 45-minute block, if that's amenable to Vice Chair Regan, to touch base and kind of have a knowledge of what's going on over the next 2 to 3 meetings. So I think it's something we're going to work on and improve together as a team.
We can work together to determine, and we do it as a Zoom meeting. So you guys don't have to try to get out of the house or get out of work or whatever. You know, I'll try to accommodate you in any way that I can to make it happen, for as long as I'm in the office anyway.
Of course. And then you were about to lead into a second update, Lisa, about a hire, I believe.
Oh, yes. We have interviewed for the project manager, grants administrator position. We're still negotiating. I'm not sure if we will have somebody or if I may have to go out again. Just not sure where that's headed. Our challenge, we're on the 4th time out to try to deal with getting an assessment technician. It's just been horrible. People are getting eaten up by other communities, other towns. They're enticing to spend more money to get them. So then, you know, we lose them. So it's the market out there right now. It's an employee market rather than an employer market. It's very difficult to fill positions. So, you know, again, also with your goal for the next town manager for succession planning and all that, we definitely have to deal with it, because right now the market out there is not very good. So, you know, I'm really working hard on it, trying to see what we're going to do for that position, as well as the assessment one. Did we lose somebody? I don't know. Never mind. Sorry. So that's what's going on with that. I'm not sure if I had anything else. Let me just look at my notes here. COVID cases, test kits. Nope, that's all I had for now. Wishing you all a happy new year and hope you had a wonderful holiday season so far.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. So with that, we'll move to item 11, adoption of the minutes. So I would entertain a motion to
Uh-oh, we lost Steve. He froze.
I'll make
Don,
that
you're back
motion.
up again.
Oh, okay.
I
So
make
allow
a
Steve,
motion to accept the meeting minutes as laid out in the agenda.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Very good. Let's go around the horn here. Ms. Nuccio,
Yes.
Mr. Luba,
Aye.
Mr. Khan,
Yes.
Ms. Udashak,
Yes.
and Ms. Murray.
Yes.
I'm an aye. That motion carries.
Steve says yes. No.
I'm not feeling very piratey tonight. I'm in the yes mood, not the I.
All right.
He's
All right.
gonna-
Do we have Steve back yet or no?
No.
Not yet. No.
Okay, let's move on then. Let's move on to number 12, correspondence to council. Who has decided to take on that task?
I don't think we've decided to.
Colleen,
Oh,
I'm gonna
Colleen?
do it. I think this is my last time I'm gonna do it. I think Katie's gonna take it over. She's gonna take it over because she'll probably do a way better job. But anyways, as far as I know, we had 3. So if I missed any, please, anybody jump right in. We did receive an email regarding contaminated wells and undrinkable water. We received a second email about our town goals. And
Steve.
a third letter we received, or I sent an email concern about the salt, the road salt usage, along with some pictures. If I missed any, please jump in. Thank you.
Anybody?
He's back.
He's back.
All right,
Okay.
sorry about that. Sorry about that, everyone. So I assume John took over and is
Yes,
starting
he
a roll
did.
vote on the adoption of minutes.
He did. He did.
We
well.
Okay.
we're on number 13, Steve, chairperson's report. I'm glad you're back from the ozone layer here.
I know it's fun times. I just lost my internet on my laptop. It's one thing I need to work on. That's my personal goal, is getting better Wi-Fi. So chairperson's report, I had a couple items. So just wanted to thank public safety. I know Chief Lytle isn't on, but I see Jim Toomey is here for CERT. Just want to thank them for another successful holiday tour. I believe it was mentioned at one point it's their 20th anniversary. So, it's a great tradition, and it's a pleasure to see it come through every year, especially being close to where they usually launch off. I hear the music pretty much every other night. So the second update was wanting to thank survey respondents for the town manager stakeholder survey. I think it provides a very beneficial anecdotal snapshot of our community's thoughts and feelings on the topic, and we should be convening within the next few weeks with Mike Wilkinson through executive session to finalize any documents before we officially go out to do the recruitment process for that position. So keep that in mind, and hopefully we'll hear back about scheduling dates and coordinating with counselors. Speaking of future meetings, just a friendly reminder that the Miracle Field site visit is January 9th, I believe at 9 a.m. in East Lyme for counselors. RSVP with Lisa and myself and John if you can or can't make it. But looking forward to it. I don't know if there'll be a rain date, but hopefully the weather will hold up for a tour. Other than that, I do want to kind of concur with the interim town manager that I wish you all a very happy new year, and looking forward to working with all of you again in the next year. And if anyone would like to join me, as long as you have quorum, the chair hours will be next Thursday. So with that being said, that is my main update for this evening. And we can move on to item number 14, communications and petitions from council persons. And you can signify by raising your hand or *9 if you're on a mobile device. I believe I see Councilor Luba followed by Councilor Udacek have their hands raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be, again, I'll try and be brief. I just wanted to extend my appreciation to all the town council members for approving the study. I think that was an important move, and I think it's something that shows that when we put our heads together, and we put what's good for the town of Tolland as a whole together ahead of our own interests, that that it's something that we can really achieve and do great things for the town. So I just want to extend my appreciation for that. Even though I'm not affected by it, I know that there are many people are, and I think we just did a great thing in at least moving forward on that issue. And also, I just want to take an opportunity to say I hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I hope everyone has a very happy New Year. And just remember, though, that 2022 means 2022. So
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Luba. Counselor Yudichak?
Yeah, I should go back to the correspondence for a moment. It's getting late now, so maybe we just discuss it next time. I know Ms. Nuccio brought it up last time, maybe how to handle it differently. I don't know if that's a discussion for the council. I don't know if you remember that, or if you want to still further discuss that at another time. And I just wanted to mention that Sammy and I are going next Tuesday just to finish up some tours. We're gonna finish up looking at the other 2 fire stations. The chief offered that when we visited last time because we didn't get to all 4. And we're also gonna take a look at the rec center since the only time I really go in is for voting. So I like to also see the new work. Plus we're voting on these things in the capital budget possibly. And we're possibly gonna look at the turf field as long as there's not any snow. So I just wanted to let the council members know we're doing that. And I would think if anybody else wanted to do that, I know Lou's always saying, let me know. So we're going to be doing that next Tuesday. I think it's equally important to visit all our departments, no matter how big or small they are. So I agree with Mr. Luba. It was a long conversation about the wells. Every resident to me is important, and I'm glad we unanimously voted on that together. And I do wish everybody a happy new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Yudichak. Is there anyone else? I'm just working off the phone. It's a little bit tighter. Oh, okay. See, Colleen's hand is still up. Counselor Khan.
I just wanted to say thank you for everybody to working together, and hopefully we can solve this issue quickly rather than later. And I just want to wish you the best for 2022. And as I said, thank you for everybody working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Checking through, swiping through, make sure. All right. There is no one else. We will move on to item 15, public list of participation on any subject within the jurisdiction of the town council with a 3-minute limit. Again, if you'd like to speak, you can hit the signify the raise hand button or *9 if you're on a mobile device. And I see Claudette Morehouse.
Thank you, Claudette Morehouse, 89 Merlot Way. I just want to give my sincere thanks to going forward with the study. You have no idea what you did. It's a little glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. I know $50,000 is a lot of money, and y'all had great questions. But just to put a little bit of that in perspective, I've been going through this since 2012. I've spent out of my household alone $35,000 in repairs. Anything with a water component has been replaced in my house. And if it does end up where I do get city water, I know it's going to take some time. I'll probably reach that 50,000 out of my own pocket. So just going through with the study tonight was huge for me, and I really appreciate it. You know, I brought this to town council 5 years ago, and we've gone through extensive tests and studies, and I really feel the wheels are actually moving right now. And I just really appreciate all your hard work and due diligence and moving forward as well. Thank you very much. Y'all have a happy, healthy new year.
Thank you, Claudette. Is there anyone else from the public? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion for adjournment at 10:56 p.m.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Counselor Yudichak, seconded by Counselor Luba. All those in favor, we will do a roll call vote. Counselor Yudichak,
Aye.
Counselor Murray,
Aye.
Vice Chair Regan,
Aye.
Councilwoman Nuccio,
Aye.
Counselor Khan,
Yes.
and I believe I am an aye. That should be unanimous. So we are adjourned at 10:56. Again, thank you, everyone. Wishing you a happy
Recording
new
stopped.
year.